Hello, welcome to the Box of Scraps, a fully researched chronicle of Marvel Studios. Each episode, we talk about the production history of the next film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, who made it, how it was made, and why. All in service of gaining a deeper understanding of how it became the biggest franchise in movie history and why it feels like it's lost. My name is Jeremy, and joining me is Kerry.
What's up? It's me again.
Box of Scraps is a part of Minimap, which is a website about video games. If you're interested in listening to us talk about games, news, read reviews, previews, and the like, you can head to minimap.com.au for everything else that we do. We also want to give a quick shout out to Ruby Innes for making the wonderful cover art for the show. She's done a really amazing job. And if you're interested in hearing any of the sources, I will list them at the end. Kerry, it's hour 743 of us recording 2 episodes of this show.
That's how we usually do it.
It is. But like, I think it's hard now because we feel like we've just run a marathon and now we get to run another one immediately.
I won't speak for you, Jeremy, but I found that last time pretty easy because for transparency, audience, we finished recording episode 0 of this show about an hour and a half ago. We went away, we had some dinner, and we're back now to record this one. And I had a great time. This afternoon. So I'm ready for more.
I did have a great time as well. I think the exhaustion of the concept.
You have a more daunting task than I do.
Also, just like the as I said in the last episode, the many months of work that this has been. There's a funny sense of like, oh my God, I'm finally talking about it, like into a microphone as opposed to just with some friends here and there about what I've been working on. And like you as well, but like I've been explicitly not sharing parts or nearly all of the show itself with you so that you can come in completely blind with only your knowledge of the film and other just random stuff that's just been a part of cultural osmosis here and there around these films.
That's me. I'm the Osmote.
Yes, Osmosis Kerry is what we call you. So if you've listened to episode 0, then you understand what the concept of this show is going to be. If you've skipped episode 0, I do recommend you listen to it because it does give you a whole lot of backstory around the structure and the history of Marvel Studios. But the way this episode works, or rather the way episode 0 works is going to be unlike the rest of the episodes going forward, because now that I've set the scene for the studio, each episode going forward is now going to be about a specific film, as I said in the intro, in order of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The structure of the episode is going to be relatively simple. It starts off just talking about the history of the character and also the history of the versions of the versions of the film that existed prior to this one coming out. And then it's just going to go straight into stuff around production history of the film, bringing on creatives, what Marvel Studios was doing at the time, the impact the film had on the studio going forward, concept art, like stuff around how the script changed or didn't change, visual effects, and then any problems, the film coming out. That's sort of going to be the structure of the show going forward. Different films will require different chops and changes, like I don't need to do the history of the character when it's the second in a trilogy, for example. That's sort of kind of covered. I might talk a little bit about like a villain here or there, but for the most part, it's the origins are going to feel like a little bit more holistic around the character. And then as we get further and further into Marvel Studios, making more and more films and changing up how they have produced those films, those will be reflected in the episodes as well.
And as with the last episode, I am here as the surrogate for you, the audience members, to ask questions as a generally well-informed, casual MCU fan, I would say.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully, you and I, audience, we are linked via the brain, and I am asking your questions as you think of them.
Linked via the brain.
Linked via the brain.
Yeah, and off the top as well, I wanted to do what I did in the first episode, which is shout out a couple of sources specifically. One of them is The Reign of Marvel Studios by Joanna Robinson, Dave Gonzalez, and Gavin Edwards. That book is one of the main reasons the show is able to exist. It's a really phenomenal book. I really highly recommend you go out and pick up a copy and read it. If you're interested in the history of the MCU, they have a lot of really amazing stories and interviews in it. I will often be referring to that book either as Reign of Marvel Studios or even just Reign or Robinson and Co. This is just for shorthand, just to keep the episode moving. The other main book that I'm wanting to mention is The Story of Marvel Studios by Tara Bennett. That one is a Marvel Studios sanctioned history book around leading from Iron Man all the way into I think it goes maybe until the Marvels or maybe a little bit earlier. It's around there, like sort of the 2022 mark. Another really phenomenal book. A lot of really amazing images in it, a lot of really great stories. A little bit sanitized just through the nature of it's a Marvel Studios sanctioned book. They don't talk about some of the problems that may have happened on set as much as maybe as much as perhaps the size of them actually were. There is a third book as well that I did want to talk about just up front. This one is called The Art of Marvel Studios Iron Man. This book was written by John Rhett Thomas. Each of the Marvel Studios films has a really wonderful art book that goes along with it. I have a copy right next to me.
Whoa.
It's exactly what you'd expect with an art book. You know, it's sort of this like a 3.5 size art book. Each film has one. They used to be very, very, very expensive. But about a year ago, they started to re-release them under a new name, but the contents of the book is the same. So now they've got the Infinity Saga branding at the top. And especially because the old versions of these books, I think, go for like $190 each.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like the markup on them is huge because they were relatively limited at the time. Especially for the hardcover ones. The softcover ones are much cheaper. But yeah, so if you don't feel like paying that much, like I don't, they are slowly, not even slowly, they're honestly really quickly re-releasing all of these. The only one that never got a book was The Incredible Hulk, just through the nature of it just being a sort of a different studio. They did actually announce it, but it just never got made.
What a shame.
And finally, the reason that I know that when they re-release the books, they are different is because I also managed to pick up the older versions of those art books. So I've got now 2 copies of Iron Man.
Joking me?
No. So I looked through the original art book that Marvel released back in 2009 or 2010, whenever this little mini box set of the first 4 came out. And I went through, after I read through the hardcover version, I then went through both of the hardcover and the softcover at the exact same time, turning over the same pages. And aside from the new one having a different layout and having much more readable font, they are practically identical. So there's no omissions.
How much was that box set, Jeremy?
Oh, this was on sale for $50 altogether. So that these...
When?
A few weeks ago. Maybe a couple
way.
Yeah, like the softcover ones are not hard to find. It was on clearance because
the softcover ones.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. The softcover ones are on clearance. Hardcover one I think was only like $45. And the softcover ones they're not like, these aren't really worth a whole lot just because of the nature of they're re-releasing them in a nicer hardcover and again with a better layout. So I would recommend honestly just picking up the new ones. But for $50, getting Iron Man 1, 2, Thor, and Captain America in a little mini box. Plus, I got to satisfy my curiosity about, did they change anything in between? Did they omit anything? The answer is no. But did my due diligence.
Yeah, no kidding. I think you went a bit above and beyond due diligence in a way.
It's quite cool. Comes in a big hard case.
Wow. Can't believe you've got so many props prepared.
Oh, we're not done yet, but I'll get to it. Just pull out like an Iron Man.
Suit off camera.
All right, cool. So
Paul Bettany's there.
And of course, I always want to say a big thank you to archive.org as well, just for being amazing. They're a tough spot at the moment, so they could really use your financial help. Are you ready, Kerry, to talk about Iron Man?
I reckon.
Did you want to quickly, just before we do, we didn't last episode talk about just our personal histories in Marvel and the MCU, and I think that was probably maybe for the best because we wanted to get into it. But what's your brain history with Marvel?
My brain
and the MCU.
Yeah. No, it's a good idea. Let's do that now. In terms of Marvel movies before the MCU, I did watch a few of them, but not all of them. Like I caught up with the Spider-Man movies, and I watched Spider-Man 3 when that came out in cinemas, and it was lackluster. Watched some of the X-Men movies, hit and miss. But yeah, there's something about Iron Man. So that came out when I was 13. I was in year 7, just started high school. And I don't know, I remember really enjoying the trailer for it and being fairly excited enough to go and see it in cinemas, which I wasn't expecting to. And I really, really enjoyed it. I didn't watch the Hulk at all.
Have you seen it? I remember watching
I have seen it. Yeah. I went back and watched it a couple of times, I think, before Infinity War Endgame kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I watched Iron Man 2 with family at the drive-through cinema in Melbourne.
Uh-huh.
And I was pretty disappointed with that movie 2 years after it was the first one. It was fine, but it was it wasn't that memorable. And with that one being a little less great, I kind of fell off pretty distinctly. Like with Thor and Captain America looking to me cursorily like they were just kind of churned out, and thinking that the second Iron Man movie had just kind of been churned out, I was like, I didn't care about Iron Man. They kind of made me care, but I really don't care about Thor or Captain America, and they're just pumping these out, and I'm not interested. That being said, I then did jump on with Avengers because everyone did, because it was huge in 2012. And then I'm trying to think. I watched Iron Man 3 when that came out the next year. And then I don't think I really watched... I didn't see any other MCU movies, I don't think, until Civil War was getting ready to come out in 2016. And the trailers for that were looking actually pretty impressive. And that was the year I met you, and you had a healthy collection of DVDs and Blu-rays. So I started borrowing from your collection of all the movies I hadn't caught up on. So I caught up on all the Captain America movies that I hadn't seen before. And I really enjoy the first Avenger. Of course, Winter Soldier as well. I really like Civil War, and I was basically caught up at that point and then the Thor movies, and then Ragnarok came out, which was amazing. And we got to watch Doctor Strange and then Black Panther. So yeah, I sort of caught up at the beginning of phase 3, and then I was current with that all the way through till Endgame. Yeah, I really enjoy these movies, and I really enjoy going back to them. And it's so funny thinking about how long it's been, because I do have memories of it starting, but being disengaged for so much of it, and then locking in after a certain point, it's a funny perspective to have. That said, it's long enough now since that point of when Civil War came out, that was 9 years ago now, that I do feel nostalgic for these movies. So yeah, I'm when finishing. So this isn't necessarily a rewatch podcast in the traditional sense. That said, for us, it is going to be, in the lead up to these movies where we're watching them so that we're caught up to, and you can treat it that way if you want, audience members. But something you asked me to do was to not watch any MCU movies leading up to this, except for in the week in advance of the shows coming out or in the week of advance of us recording the show, to then watch the movie of whatever we were about to talk about.
Yeah, I think what I said was, because I think you were talking about planning a rewatch, like a loose one.
Yeah. Yeah. I was getting in the mood for it.
Yeah. I wasn't saying if you go to the cinemas, I'm going to be furious. It wasn't like that.
No.
Yeah.
No. But there was definitely a thing of if we can hold off and then we can, watch them fresh for this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so watching Iron Man this week I haven't seen it in ages. I'm watching it for the first time in a long time, and with this lens, and also coming off the back of the newer stuff that we've been watching from the MCU, like the Marvels and Quantumania, and I haven't even seen Cap 4 yet. Honestly, watching this movie got me really, really excited, and really excited to talk about it here today and to learn more about it and to get to watch all of the next ones through this lens too. So yeah, that's me.
So I guess, yeah. So the way my relationship with the Marvel movies has been perhaps a bit more intense. So
do you want to talk about your subreddit?
My subreddit?
Didn't you earn the Marvel subreddit for a little bit?
No. I owned a Pokemon one for a little bit.
Pokemon one. Oh, yeah. How did I get inflated?
Yeah. So I grew up a lot reading comics. Like I was reading Captain America comics when I was 5, basically from when I could read. Like I really, really liked comics, like not just Marvel as well, like a bunch of other stuff, like the Simpsons comics were okay. Some Disney comics when I was young, and then getting into some other stuff when I got a little bit older, when I started to have some disposable income and I'd pick up my own comics. But like throughout most of my childhood, there was a lot of comic stuff around. That was primarily because my dad is in his 70s. And so he grew up reading comics. So he had a lot of the ones that he had growing up. He's got some pretty cool ones. He's got some really old ones. He really liked a lot of the like Captain America, Nick Fury, Doctor Strange type comics. Not as much the X-Men or Iron Man or Hulk as much, but a lot of the more like psychedelic looking ones from that like 60s era was definitely his vibe.
Espionage.
Yeah. And so when the films were coming out, like prior to the MCU, I was still watching basically all of the films. Like I would watch the True Fantastic Four films. I'd watch the Spider-Man films. I'd watch Ghost Rider. I'd watch, like I wanted to watch the Daredevil and Dad's like, don't, it sucks. And I went, oh really? And he's like, yeah, but that's because I was too young to know that movie's going to be bad.
Yeah.
And then Iron Man came out and I was what, 11, 10, maybe 11, depending on when I saw it. And it was like the perfect film for me, the perfect age for someone who grew up reading comics.
Totally.
And then it became like a ritual where every time there was one that would come out, Dad and I would go and see it. And then I would pick up the Blu-ray when it eventually came to home. And then I'd watch that. And then I'd watch the behind the scenes and then I'd watch it again. And then I'd watch it again. And then I'd wait until the new one came out. Then I'd watch that. And then I'd watch all the ones previously when I then watched the new one, because I kept on wanting to see the progression of the story as it was told, because it was a story that was being told like sort of in real time for quite a while, because even though it's just the next one, they still in a funny way would nearly always set the film in present day. Like specifically like almost to the month. They would at least set it in the year almost every time, aside from, like a Captain America, right? So
definitely helped that sort of serialized nature of it.
Totally. And then Avengers came out, and I remember seeing it. I got Dad and I got to see the early screening, so it was like a day or two before before the movie came out. And I remember after that, I went to soccer practice, and I was like, you guys have got to go see this fucking movie. And they're like, what is it? I'm like, the Avengers. And they're like, oh yeah, like, is it all right? I'm like, yeah, it's like really good. And they're like, okay, yeah, maybe, I don't know, like sort of like Thor.
And you're like, no, you're not listening to me.
And I was sitting there going like, no, like you got to understand, this is going to be like a thing. And they're like, yeah. And then a few days later, like I went to school and everyone was like, oh my God, did you see the movie? And then everyone online was like, I can't get tickets. It's full, it's packed. And it became this huge thing. But I remember going to see Guardians day one and having to explain to people that, no, this movie's good. Actually, I know it's got a tree. I know it's got a raccoon. Like it's got good shit in there. Went to advanced screenings went to midnight screenings for Civil War and Guardians 2, which was a double feature with Guardians 1. I would tweet at the directors, and like ask them a question here or there. I would be on the subreddit. I would be on a whole lot of spaces to try and fill as much of it as I could. And then I'd get into the TV shows. And all through this time, I was reading a comic here and there. And then it came around to Far From Home. Look, we're getting older. We're getting more media literate as we're getting older. Like, by the time Far From Home comes out, I think I'm 24, 23. And
plus we've just had Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah. But like we'd also had COVID and then Black Widow. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I think you're talking about No Way Home.
Sorry, I am talking about No Way Home. I will simply never remember which one is which. Talking about No Way Home. And that was sort of the beginning of me going like, oh, this is fucking odd. Like this doesn't really track.
I watched that turn in real time. As we kind of enjoyed the first watching and then we sort of spoke about it after the fact. And then you went and saw it a second time and you were like, I think I really don't like this movie.
Yeah. And it's not because I think that it's there's a whole lot of problems with it, which we'll get to it. But like, that was sort of the beginning of me going like, oh, like there's something really weird about the way these films are constructed. And, I'd sort of go back and forth through some of the older ones and I'd look at it with a different lens, a more critical eye. And I'd be like, oh, I can sort of see weirdness here. And like, especially at this point, I was well aware around things like the creative committee. Like I was up on the Ike Perlmutter stuff as it was happening in real time. I remember when
everything we discussed in the prior episode.
Yeah. Like I remember about like hearing rumors because a lot of that stuff we didn't really like, we had an idea of what was going on, but we didn't know the intricacies of it. So you could blame certain things on them, but you were never 100% sure if it was them or not unless someone spoke out of turn, which didn't happen that often, especially when Disney was involved. So it would be something really bad that would cause someone to speak up out of turn. And I remember the day Feige spoke up out of turn when he specifically he had enough around the Age of Ultron release where someone came up to him with a microphone and said like, hey, like where the hell's all the Black Widow toys? And his response was something along the, I forget the quote, like we'll get to it in Age of Ultron when we do get to it where I'll quote it properly, but he said something along the lines of, yeah, where are all the Black Widow toys? Which was not a thing that man did often, especially back then, because he was still very much beholden to Ike Perlmutter. So there was a lot of, like you really noticed stuff back then, as well as all the wild fan theories. One of the funniest ones being that Coulson was going to become the Vision. That one stuck around for years and years and years.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So like as time goes on and as I look at things in a more critical eye, like I've become very, very critical on Marvel in the same way that I have become of Star Wars and just Disney as a whole. But I think it's always come from, I just want them to make just want milk that tastes like real milk, like I just want them to make a film that feels like a film made by some people who made a film. Iron Man's a film made by some people who feel like they're making a film.
Yeah. And it feels like that.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. I also had for a little while, I had some insider information into what was going on at Marvel. There was a Facebook group that had like 500,000 likes on Facebook back when that was important on Facebook. And inside of that group, there were a handful of, let's say journalists, but let's use that term a little bit lightly. Industry insiders that would leak stuff to the Facebook group's moderating little group chat that we had going on. And that group, that page every now and again would break stories around casting decisions in films prior to them being put anywhere else. It was a very weird insight that I had for like, let's say 3 months until they kicked me out of that group because they were complaining that I didn't post as much when it was really a really strange group full of odd conversations happened. It was an odd one. It's not a good thing. I'm glad that Facebook page doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, I remember being in there when some reporters were posting the fact that the Shocker was going to be in Spider-Man: Homecoming. And so, whoa! Yeah, but like I remember like that. I remember that story breaking inside of our group chat first, and then into the Facebook page that we posted on, and then all the trades picked up our page. I say our very lightly. It wasn't really mine, but I was there. So yeah, a funny, intense connection with this franchise that I just wish it used to be like what it was.
Storied history.
Storied history.
How many times have you watched these movies in preparation for this show?
Oh, in preparation for this show. So I think I saw Iron Man about 4 or 5 times.
Okay.
It was often doing something else at the same time. Like we said, I think, we haven't spoken about it yet. One of the things that I did is I printed off the script that we'll talk about a little bit later. I watched that at the same time as I read it. I did another rewatch, which included me playing an audio commentary over it with Favreau and Downey. And there was a couple of rewatches in there just to try and pick up on things and notice things. And then there was one in there just for fun. The one in there for fun was the first one because I wanted to not be
watch it.
Yeah. I wanted to just sit and watch it. But yeah, so about 5 times. But if you ask me how many times I've seen the film over the many, many years, maybe
Hey, Jeremy, how many times have you seen the film?
Maybe 25 or 30 times. Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And it's
probably one of the films I've seen the most out of all of them. But for me, that's more like 6 or 7 times over nearly 20 years. So
that's all of them though. I've seen the worst. I've seen the worst ones up to Infinity War at least 10 times.
Yeah.
I've seen the Hulk at least 10 times and the Dark World 10 times.
Brother.
Yeah. I just used to sit and watch them.
Oh, fair enough.
Anyway. Iron Man first debuted in Marvel Comics' Tales of Suspense, number 39 in 1962. He was created by Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Don Heck, and Larry Lieber. A creation of the 60s, Stan Lee described creating Iron Man as a challenge to see if he could make people relate and enjoy reading about a weapons manufacturer. Which is a really funny thing just out of the gate. That's such a funny thing to say.
You reckon it's possible?
Yeah.
No.
Basing Tony Stark off Howard Hughes, this ultimate rich boy, playboy, inventor, brackets genius, playboy, billionaire philanthropist, meant that he was irresistible as he was created during the 60s and during the height of the Cold War. This meant that there had been an almost immediate old-fashioned sensibility to him. The space he occupied is somewhat more adult compared to Spider-Man or the X-Men that were going on.
Okay, interesting.
Are you familiar with Howard Hughes, Gary?
Not at all.
All right, I'll get to Howard Hughes. This also meant that as the Vietnam War continued, the concept of a warmonger became less and less favorable with general audiences. There wasn't a tremendous excitement around him for a while. He was also the primary weapons contractor for the USA and was the main technology guy for S.H.I.E.L.D., appearing often in Nick Fury comics of the era, not as Iron Man, but as Tony Stark in a Q-like Bond fashion. However, by the time the Avengers came around, it was the first time that he had genuine peers in his world, not on a scientific basis or intellect, but more in gravitas and just character size and weight on the page. Writer and artist Bob Layton, who joined Marvel when he was 19 and worked on Iron Man for many years, even said, quote, "I have always argued that Dr. Doom should have been the Iron Man villain. If there was ever a character who was the antithesis of Tony Stark, it was Dr. Doom." It's funny watching some of these behind the scenes shorts because immediately again, there's Victor Von Doom. This is a snippet from 2007 or something that I'm referring to here from the Iron Man Blu-ray.
That's an interesting take.
Yeah, we're not done there yet either. For a while in the late 90s and the early 2000s, Marvel Comics tried again to work out how to bring Iron Man front and center for the comics. No doubt this was partly spearheaded by the intention to create a film for many years, but at the same time, Joe Quesada reached out to prolific comic writer Warren Ellis, who was known for Astonishing X-Men, The Authority, and Dead Space 1, about Iron Man.
Dead Space.
Yeah. Warren Ellis wrote an Iron Man. After working out a kind of story that was unlike any Iron Man before it, Iron Man Extremis Issue 1 was published in January 2005. Still now, it is one of the better Iron Man stories I've ever read and focuses a great deal on the man in the armor attempting to give himself an edge that leans into the intense futurist version of the character that we know now. I remember reading Extremis, not when it came out, but maybe a handful of years after the film came out. It's a really cool story. It's a really good one. It definitely is the one of the early modern Marvel stories in terms of its vibe and its tone. And also a lot of the illustration was done. I don't exactly know how it was done by an illustrator named Adi Gravnov, but there's a 3D aspect to a lot of the illustrations in the comic, which felt very 2005. You know, it felt very like we're here in the new century. We're doing stuff in 3D now. Even comics can be in 3D. It's definitely the style of it. This became a turning point in for Iron Man into bringing him into the front in terms of importance to the comic universe, which would lead directly into the first Civil War comic, which was written by Brian Michael Bendis.
Right.
Iron Man Extremis was the first major time that Tony was taken to task with the world he had created, and also brought him into the war in the Middle East. For those who don't know.
Okay. Well, I was sitting here wondering how much, you know, if that was one of the influential Iron Man comics at the time, I was wondering how much it would have influenced this movie. It's sounding like quite a lot.
Yeah. So like we're not quite there yet, but Adi Gravnov is one of the concept artists on the film.
Okay.
They specifically brought him on to the film. For those who don't know, Howard Hughes was a movie maker, inventor, socialite, billionaire, philanthropist, etc., and one of the key inspirations behind the character of Tony Stark. He was an industrialist during the 30s, 40s, and 50s, built planes for the US military during the Second World War, and the Mark II armor is a reference to Howard Hughes' style of plane with a lot of brushed metal and polished rivets. In fact, the massive warehouse that Howard Hughes created some of his planes, like the Spruce Goose, which is a hilarious name for a plane and a very, very, very 50s vibe. The warehouse where the Spruce Goose was built is where a lot of the sets were built for Iron Man, for places like the cave. Not deliberately, but it's just a warehouse that you can use.
Fascinating.
Jon Favreau fucking loved that.
Just that little detail.
Yeah. He loved to talk about how much Howard Hughes stuff they were doing. The Martin Scorsese film, The Aviator, starring Leonardo DiCaprio is a Howard Hughes biopicture.
Oh, okay, cool.
And this is the one thing that I didn't fact check, but I'm just going to kind of correctly assume that it's true. Howard Stark's probably named after Howard Hughes. If you Google what Howard Hughes looks like.
I'm looking at him now.
Motherfucker looks like Howard Stark.
And even just that role, right? Like of a independent business person who was, you know, had successful businesses and was inventing things and manufacturing things, and then the war comes along and he helps the war effort. Like, there are some very clear parallels to draw there. And
he was like making movies while also building planes at the same time, and also then became a recluse in the same way that like Citizen Kane does in Citizen Kane, and like it's a reoccurring theme where you become that rich and that intelligent and that popular in society, and then you just completely shut off from the world. He was
completely alienated.
Yes. Starting off our story in the 1990s, Fox had the rights to Iron Man with the desire of making a universe out of them.
Interesting.
The script for the 1990s Iron Man was written by Jeff Vintar, based on a story by Vintar and Stan Lee. Allow me to get prop A.
Prop A.
So this is the script for The Iron Man, as it is told.
Oh, no.
It is... I have the second draft from August 1997. That says here, Marvel Studios, Wilshire Boulevard, Los Angeles, California.
The Kite Factory.
No. This is well before Kite Factory. This is the 90s. Kite Factory was post Perlmutter. So Marvel Studios and / Marvel Films changed names a handful of times. I didn't really get into it because it's just kind of annoying to keep track of in the last episode. But Marvel Studios became Marvel Films, became Marvel Studios, became Marvel Films, became Marvel Studios. Like it had various names from the 80s to the 2000s. And unfortunately, there's a lot of duplicates in there to sort of just make it really complicated about when and which it was in which version of itself.
Yeah.
So this was the time where Stan Lee was still working on the films. And Avi Arad might have started to been around by now.
So
we're not going to focus a whole lot on the 90s Iron Man because we're going to get into
it's funny. I've just never heard of it.
Yeah, it didn't go anywhere. So I've read this script. It's 114 pages.
Okay.
Here are my notes. Frankly, it's really bad.
Okay.
In this story, Tony Stark is a billionaire who creates weapons and refuses military contracts. That's his code. He creates a suit called the Redeemer Armor and also has many weapons and many weapon adjacent items. And after he's betrayed by one of his employees, a man named Jeremy Bland, which fucking shake my head. After he's betrayed by employee Jeremy Bland, his weapons fall into the wrong hands. Those wrong hands, MODOK.
What, really?
This main villain in this movie is MODOK. And he is comic accurate.
Oh, no.
MODOK and his band of evildoers, including Whiplash, Jigsaw, and a handful of others, are all there trying to take weapons from Tony. One of the funniest things, there's a lot of funny things in the script, which I'm going to get through most of the funny things and then nothing else because it's really bad and honestly not that important. This is mostly just novelty at this point. One of the things that Whiplash does in this film is that he just flicks his hand out like that, sort of like a Harry Potter wizard, and then things just split in two because he's got invisible whip technology that comes out of his hand.
Invisible whip technology.
Yeah, like they call it something in the text, but it's basically a really low budget way of not having to have big high tech whips.
That sucks.
Yes. MODOK is ridiculous in it. There's one sequence where Tony is infiltrating the HQ of AIM, which is MODOK's company. MODOK, with an extremely comic accurate description, is floating above him, taunting him. Tony makes a break for it and tries to get away from the biotechnological horror he's just witnessed. As he's running back through the vents, a man with robotic eyes sits in a chair patiently. Sensing the commotion in the vents, he pulls his eyes out of his head and places them on the ground, and they speed off into the vents independently. That man with robotic eyes in the script is named Vision. What is doubly funny about this is the scan in which I have, I'm assuming this is the only scan that's out there, has some words drawn over it. For example, it has a line drawn to the words, call him Vision, with the only handwritten note in the entire script writing, can't be used. And used is underlined.
So bad.
They did not have the rights to use the Vision.
Oh, right. They didn't have the rights.
Yeah. One of the funniest things.
What was he a part of?
It was probably a thing where he would have been a part of the Avengers more than anything else, which is separate to Iron Man because, Vision's kind of got a funny backstory, but like one of the things about the way the rights work is that if a new character is brought in that's related to a character directly, then I think they sometimes become a part of the rights, but sometimes new characters just are their own rights depending on how they want to split it out.
Okay.
One of the funniest things ever, though, is at some point MODOK hacks into Iron Man's suit and freezes him in place. Tony gets out of this by mechanically deploying roller skates out of the bottom of his boots and rolling around his office while frozen.
That doesn't make any sense.
There's also a guy in the script called the Living Bomb, and you can guess what he does. Also, Jigsaw is called Jigsaw because he can fit into places like vents like a jigsaw. He's a contortionist. What? Like he fits into places like a jigsaw piece.
So what does that mean? So he can places like a jigsaw piece.
If there's a small hole in the room, he can go through it because his power is he can fit into places.
Oh my God.
It's very 80s, 90s Batman coded. I don't want to see this movie. It never got made. It's bad.
Mm-hmm. Sounds it.
Jumping ahead.
That was 10 years before this movie came out.
Yes. Jumping ahead, in 2004, in 2000, New Line picked up the rights to Iron Man and spent 5 years trying to get a film made. Eventually, in 2003, Avi Arad revealed some information about Marvel's movie plans on a webcast titled Analyst Day. One tidbit was that Iron Man was being written by Miles Miller and Alfred Goff. Goff and Miller, the creators of the story, are known for the story of Spider-Man 2, I Am Number 4, Beetlejuice, Shanghai Noon, your favorite.
One of my favorites.
Lethal Weapon 4, and are the creators of Smallville and most recently Wednesday on Netflix, the Wednesday Addams show.
Right.
So they were brought on to write the story.
That is a funny mix of projects.
It sure is.
Oh, we've got another prop.
Soon after, none other than Solid Snake himself, David Hayter, was brought on to do a revision of the script. Hayter had worked on the X-Men movies at Fox 2. I have this script in front of me. Iron Man by
David Hayter's reworked.
It says on the front here, Alfred Goff and Miles Miller, revisions by David Hayter, October 21st, 2004. Notice the contents of this script are confidential and not to be reproduced or photocopied without the express consent of New Line Cinema. I've read the script as well. This one is better than the Iron Man. And this is the last version of the story before it becomes the one that we know. So this is the last version of Iron. Like there were other versions of Iron Man throughout the years. At some point, Quentin Tarantino was attached to direct an Iron Man. There was a couple of other scripts written by some other people. I have not been able to locate them. I tried for ages to try and find them. Short of reaching out to some really gross ex-journalists from the mid-2000s, which I didn't really feel like particularly doing, who apparently had seen the script, which I really had no desire to do. They're not seemingly out there much.
Right.
People have seen them. People have spoken about them. One of them is a spin-off of the Nick Fury movie, or at least related to the Nick Fury movie that got made, but it doesn't really matter. It also didn't sound very good.
Okay.
This script is also not particularly good.
Okay.
The version of this story...
This is also before the Extremis comic in 2005, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. The version I've read is from 2004, and it features Howard Stark being the main villain, named War Machine. Justin Hammer being an Obadiah Stane character, because Stane wasn't invented yet, and No Pepper. Instead, we get an ICE agent named Beth, who is an old flame of Tony's. Yeah. So there's no Stane, because again, Stane didn't exist. Pepper's not in it for some reason, and Howard Stark goes by the moniker War Machine.
And he's the villain. That is so weird.
And he's the villain. The story's a little bit more interesting, but it's also missing a lot. One of the things I really liked about it was the idea that Howard Stark, this titan of arms development, going behind Tony's back and arming the world's military. With a post 9/11 America in media in full effect, I do think it's interesting that not only is the story quite anti-war, but also the vice president, in the movie is someone that Howard Stark is working with to kind of take over the world. I mean, people didn't like Cheney back then, so why not make him the villain of the film?
Yeah.
One plot device that is in there is a biochip that has been placed in every president to secure a consistent line of succession and continuity, which is really funny because what do you reckon happens to the biochip to the president when the vice president's evil?
God, that's weird.
Yeah.
Why would anyone? That's so strange.
Yeah, they talk about it a little bit in the film. It's meant to be this chip that can always detect your vitals at all times. So if anything is wrong at any point, it will immediately know to notify whoever's in charge. So if you're poisoned, but also, it's the Star Wars inhibitor chip thing of well, what if it turns out being evil? I suppose it's what happened when 2 President Bushes in 20 years. It's what happens when that happens to a country.
Hmm.
In this film, there is no shrapnel in his heart. But instead, he was wounded in an explosion / attempt on his life, which caused him to need to build an exosuit so he could walk. This movie seems...
so it's like a mobility aid.
Kind of, but it's also an ability for him to just kind of like exist because he seems very I feel like there's a little bit missing in the script because I was not 100% sure exactly how a lot of it really comes together. I'm not a professional script reader, so I find it sometimes hard to really understand what's going on in it because it's just dialogue and then loose direction. So it's sort of its own way of reading. This movie seems impossible to make in the 2000s. There is so much reliance on CGI, and if they aren't doing CGI, they're doing practical suits, and I don't think that they had the ability to make really good-looking practical suits for what they wanted to do in this part anyway.
This was for New Line, right?
This is for New Line Cinema, yes.
Didn't they have am I right in saying they had a lot to do with Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, but the props weren't them. The props were Weta Digital.
That was all Weta.
Yeah, New Line was basically the distributor of it.
Okay. I'm just thinking this. 2004. You're looking at Harry Potter. You're looking at Lord of the Rings being standouts for visual effects in that time frame.
Yeah, but also both of those were very medieval, old-fashioned.
Yeah.
Fantasy, whereas a lot of this script is meant to feel explicitly very futuristic, very high tech, sort of like Tron, Blade Runner 2049, but like a bit shinier, like an Apple Store kind of vibe.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a story set in an alternate universe where Stark tech is everywhere. There's no Microsoft or LG or Sony. It's all Stark tech. That means it would need to have a very futuristic feeling and sheen to it. This movie sounds very expensive. There's some shared DNA between this script and the one that became the film. Lots of the modern Tony Stark anachronisms, like him being cool and likable, that had been in the comics for a little bit, but it was new relative to the age of the character, and also an intention to at least move away from the Mandarin as the villain. He was always a racist stereotype of Asian mysticism during an era where America was at war against the Viet Cong, but the further time moves from it, the worse it gets. Removing his kidnapping wholesale, though, doesn't make the story better. Removing the Mandarin does, though. This is the film that, for a while, Tom Cruise was openly speaking about in interviews about portraying Tony Stark, Iron Man.
Wow, okay. Between Mission Impossible movies.
Yep. In an interview with Empire Online, Cruise had this to say, quote, "He's a fascinating character, but we've got to figure out how it's going to work. And everyone is doing a Marvel character these days. How do we make that new? Create something fresh where it doesn't feel like, oh, here comes another superhero." This is in January of 2004.
I wonder how he feels about Iron Man now after all of this.
He actually has commented on it a handful of times. It's Tom Cruise, so he's just going to be very
enthusiastic.
Well, yeah, but also like completely like politically like correct about it, where he's going to say like,
he's not going to ruffle any feathers.
Like, yeah, look, it didn't work for me at the time, but like I think Downey did a really great job. Like.
Yeah.
This is January 2004. Later that month, comicbookmovie.com. So in an interview with comicbookmovie.com, Feige said that the script from Goff and Miller was awesome and that there should, quote, be a director soon. While the rights would revert in, I think at the end of 2005, I can't find a hard date for when the rights reverted. They didn't need to have the movie specifically finished by then, but it was more about getting it to a point that was far enough into production that Marvel would be willing to extend the rights. So it's kind of like a soft deadline. That's sort of the way it all goes. Like if they're 3 months out from a film being released in cinemas and the rights are about to revert, they might say, hey, like we want it back. Like there is always that chance because maybe they view the right reverting as something that is more important to them than the film coming out. But especially Marvel at this point, they're probably just going to say like, you've got a movie coming out, release the fucking movie.
Yeah.
It's a soft deadline, but still one they clearly wanted to reach. On Cruise, Feige said at the time, there have been discussions with Cruise over the last several years, and there are a number of factors involved. Feige told the Continuum, all we know is that we're putting all the pieces in place, and we'll find the best Tony Stark that we can get. Now, Feige saying should be a director soon wasn't quite true, as it took until November of 2004 for New Line and Marvel to announce that writer, actor, director Nick Cassavetes was attached to direct.
Okay.
Animation Magazine quotes Aviarad by saying, quote, being able to work with such an acclaimed writer-director as Nick Cassavetes to bring one of our preeminent superhero franchises to the big screen is really special. Nick grew up reading Iron Man and personally loves the character. He shares our vision of how to bring Iron Man to life in a way that will appeal to a mass audience as well as the core superhero fan base.
Okay.
However, just 3 months later, Tom Cruise had publicly confirmed that he would not be Iron Man. Sci-Fi Wire quotes Cruise, quote, it's not happening, not with me. They came to me at a certain point, and when I do something, I want to do it right. And if I commit to something, it has to be done in a way that I know it's going to be something special. And that, as it was lining up, it just didn't feel like to me it was going to work. Fair enough. I feel like as a world, I think we don't feel like we really missed out on a whole lot there. Like I like Tom Cruise enough as an actor. I don't want him as Tony Stark. He's not that guy.
I don't think he's that charismatic.
No, he's not. Like, he's charismatic in Mission Impossible and Top Gun because he's playing a particular role.
Yeah.
And that role is not Tony Stark. He's just not that guy. Not long after. Oh, sorry. According to the Reign of Marvel Studios, Feige said that Cruise's asking fee at the time was more than even a profitable studio like Fox was willing to risk on an untested superhero property.
Right, okay. He was just too big.
He was just too big.
Mm.
Not long after, the rights reverted back to Marvel, and Feige, Maisel, and Arad were free to use the character as the debut film for their new studio.
I wonder how they would have felt about that at the time, because it would have been perhaps a bit freeing to just have it under their own roof, but they've got this thing where they can't get a script that's going to work for it properly, and they don't have an actor tied to it, and the one they did is just spoken out against working on it anymore, and they had a director, and well, what ended up happening with Cassavetes?
The film just never made it. Like, it just couldn't get off the ground in time. I don't remember if he specifically left the project before it reverted or as a part of the reverting. Everyone can sort of look at the time and go like, it's just not going to happen, mate. Like, let's all stop wasting our money. I couldn't find a whole lot of information specifically from Cassavetes. But I looked up the films that he had made. Most of them are kind of mid. So I don't think that anyone's really that bummed that this film never got made, and especially because the script is still really quite strange. There's a reoccurring thing, I believe, in this one where, and this is a common Iron Man theme that I will briefly probably talk about at the end of the thing, but in the Goff and Miller and David Hayter version of the story, he often has to head home and plug himself into basically like a wall outlet because his arc reactor, his power source is running out of charge. And for decades, I think that was a really common thing in the Iron Man comics.
It's just like if you've only seen the first Spider-Man movies, learning that it was quite common for Peter to have to recharge his web fluid, reload it, get a new canister or a new cartridge for it. It was like, wait, what? That doesn't make any sense.
And that's the story I know.
Yeah.
And the thing about the Iron Man power issue is that it was never enjoyable to read those stories because there was this arbitrary time limit on every single battle. And so it meant that, one, there were a whole lot of issues where sometimes he would just have to leave. And that was a really good way of keeping a villain to survive to the next issue. Yeah. And not putting him in jail or whatever. It was like he's fighting like the Submariner and they're beating each other up. And then Tony's like, crap, I've got, 14% left and I've got to use 8% to head back home. And so he's just clamoring to get away and he leaves and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing is as well is like, they don't talk about this as much in this script, a little bit in the 90s one, but a reoccurring theme as well was Tony's alter ego, Iron Man, not being a public understanding that he was Iron Man, and that in the text, it was his bodyguard, which they make a reference to in the film as a joke about like, I don't buy this bodyguard thing. Who would?
Yeah.
It's very silly. It's very like, like it's worse than Bruce Wayne Batman and worse than Clark Kent Superman. It's
Clark
like,
Kent. Yeah.
Because it's like, you can always make the case like, oh, well, Clark ran away because he's kind of like not a wimp, but he's kind of a klutz.
He's just a reporter or whatever. Yeah.
Whereas like Iron Man having a bodyguard is like, or Tony Stark having a bodyguard that's Iron Man and then being two separate people, even though they're never in the room at the same time, is just objectively hilarious.
Yeah.
So just before we get into the film that we know, there is one little bit of spice that I did want to report on. Now, I did mention last episode that I'm going to refrain as much as I can from avoiding bringing in rumors and unsubstantiated claims. I will bring one into this only because it's a very, very peculiar thing to potentially lie about. It's very, very specific, and I did want to bring it up just with that saying I do not know if this is true. It was reported on by Humberto Gonzalez for the Latino Review. He now works at Heroic Hollywood, I think. Gonzalez is like a big like scooper kind of guy, kind of like Jeff Snyder, I think is his name, who runs the outlet The In Snyder, which I think is a really hilarious name for a thing. I think that I don't really particularly vibe with him almost at all, but I think that he's got a really great name for a website.
Yeah.
So to bring a little bit of spice, Humberto Gonzalez for Latino Review shared some insight from one of his sources. Now, I'm not going to make a habit of quoting various scoopers or Hollywood insiders, but this one felt so specific, I would find it hard to not believe, or at least there be some truth to it. This is what Latino Review's source had to say about the matter of the rights reverting from New Line Cinema back to Marvel. Let's be clear here, and this is a letter that was written to Gonzalez. Let's be clear here. Arad was happy to renew Iron Man with New Line for a total of 4 years. He was happy with a script by Tim McLean's in which Iron Man was dressed by his toaster. He sat in meetings with Bob Shea, who insisted that Iron Man not fly, and he was okay with that. His vision for Iron Man was to pretty much do anything Shea and Emmerich wanted to do. So how did he get it back from them when the new opportunity arose? Simple. He lied. He lied to New Line. He lied to New Line and Emmerich for months, telling them that they were in negotiations for an extension, leading him to believe that the project was going forward. Then, on the day the option was up, he pulled it. Arad so baldly and boldly lied to everyone back in those days. It's astonishing he wants unearned credit now. Now, this letter was a response to Avi Arad himself taking a decent amount of credit for getting Iron Man back to Marvel, which we kind of know that was not his goal as a businessman working at Marvel. He didn't want the rights to come back to Marvel. His job was to license them out. His job was to license them out in the hope of getting films made. But his layering concept was around licensing them out to other studios. So, yeah.
Plus, when the rights are up, the rights are up. Like, it's not necessarily something that's in his control.
No, but it would have been in his control to push for an extension, right? If he wanted that film to be there, he definitely was within his rights in his job at the time to be like, hey, we want you to make this film, blah, 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 blah. So, leading into the film, 3 small shorts, which were made up into one story, were made by Marvel to introduce Iron Man to kids and educate them on the character. These were 3D animated shorts. They were directed by Tim Miller. Yeah, like I'd not heard of these either. These are Tim Miller, the director of Deadpool.
Yeah, the guy from Blur, is it?
Yeah, so it was directed by Tim Miller and produced by Studio Blur, these shorts. So there were 3 shorts that were made. It's realistically one short, just split into 3 chunks.
Okay.
Some believe that these shorts were instrumental to getting Iron Man greenlit as a way of getting Iron Man as a character out in front of kids. I wanted to bring this up because Joe Quesada specifically dispels this rumor on his Tumblr. These shorts were created as a part of an overall strategy and initiative within Marvel to help with Iron Man's recognizability factor prior to the film's release. Let me add that in no way should this diminish Tim or anyone's role in the making of these shorts, but the claim simply isn't true. Heck, if there wasn't an Iron Man movie already in the works, we never would have gotten the budget to get these done anyway.
The claim isn't true. Which specific claim is he saying?
The claim that these shorts were instrumental in getting the Iron Man movie greenlit.
Oh, greenlit, right.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So he's saying, no, they were underway at the same time as the movie.
Or rather, like that these were an addition to the film to get people to know what Iron Man was prior to the movie coming out.
Okay.
I think it's actually maybe important to double down on that. So Iron Man, for a very long time, people were not really aware of what Iron Man was. And so there was a misconception that he was actually a robot. Because when you look at him, you just see a robot. You don't always know that there's a man under there. And it seems funny now, but for a really long time, people were not under a general impression was not, this is a man. So in these shorts specifically, it's Hulk, Spider-Man, and Iron Man fighting an actual giant robot, and you see Tony in the suit outside the fact. So it's done quite cleverly to make sure that all the misconceptions are sort of solved by the end of these shorts. Quesada also notes that there was intention to release similar ones about Thor, but they never ended up making it out of the storyboard phase, which I would love to find. Unfortunately, the distribution avenues for those shorts turned out to be much more restrictive than we first imagined. Our hope at the time was to get them on TV, but ended up relegating strictly to the net. These distribution issues killed the Thor program because the dollars spent wouldn't add up to the eyeballs that was streaming content back then, back in 2007. These shorts are viewable online. All 3 together run for about 5 minutes overall. They tell a story about Spider-Man fighting a robot, calling Tony for help, and then he takes it down, flies it up into space before it explodes. Hulk then catches a falling Tony, and they all fight a few more, saving the day. A lot of weird Avengers parallels in there.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I wonder if like with the Avengers script, yeah, totally. With the movie that we know. Yeah. It's also interesting they decided to pair him with those other characters. It's like, oh, everyone likes Spider-Man. And Spider-Man, this guy who's cool, he's asking for help. Yeah. Who's he going to call for help? He's going to call Iron Man. Iron Man's so strong that he can help Spider-Man. So I didn't write it down, but I believe it's Quesada specifically mentions that they wanted to build the popularity of Iron Man to make him the size of a Spider-Man or Hulk type character, because Hulk as well, very popular character. Sort of a universally popular character in a way that just like was always loved, and had a movie come out in 2003. So there was an idea of freshness around it. So at this point, Marvel Studios was kicking into gear their first at-bat, which I believe I referenced prior, but it's the at-bat referring to they get 4 chances with the loan from Merrill Lynch. I don't remember if I actually included that quote in there or not, but Feige refers to the 4 films they have as a budget as at-bats, or maybe Maisel refers to them as that. Oh, yeah, no, I don't recall that.
Right. Feige was looking to get the ball rolling, but he would need help. With Maisel and Arad managing the business of the studio, Feige wouldn't be able to produce 2 films on his own. Bennett, the author of Story of Marvel Studios, the sanctioned book, quote, I work well with a close-knit team. Stephen and I had a conversation this is Feige, by the way. I work well with a close-knit team. Stephen and I had a conversation in the garage about wanting to do more. Jeremy had showcased wanting to do more, being a part of putting together those presentations for the banks. Suddenly, we started working on Iron Man and the Hulk. So they both started doing notes and ideas for the script. At a certain point, I said, you can't work on both. I went, Jeremy, you're on Iron Man. Stephen, you're on Hulk. That is Jeremy Latcham, who is one of the producers on Iron Man, and Stephen Broussard, who I mentioned earlier in the previous episode, who is the adjacent producer on The Incredible Hulk. So we're going to hear a lot about...
This is how both of those movies came out roughly around the same time.
Yes. And so we're going to hear a lot about Jeremy in this one. We're going to hear a lot about Stephen Broussard in the next one. Bennett goes on to say that this is the structure of Marvel Studios still to this day. The idea that an associate producer would do a, quote, tour on a film where you'd remain on a project from the inception to the idea through to the release. And that from there, associate producers would climb up the corporate ladder and then go to co-producers and then executive producers, which isn't like exactly what Feige did with Avi Arad in the day.
Mm-hmm.
With Jeremy Latcham being the associate producer on Iron Man, he was on the film every day. His first task was to find someone to write it. Now, Latcham is quoted here by Bennett by saying, "I have never done this before. I started sending out material to writers, but no one believed that Marvel Studios was going to make their own movie without a major studio. I got pass after pass after pass. No one was interested, and they didn't believe our money was real."
I mean, I can't necessarily blame them. Anyone
Absolutely
who's savvy with the industry at that point in time knows that Marvel only got back up to where they were by selling everything they had to other people.
Mm-hmm. And after
after
all of the in-house bankruptcy problems, Iron Man not working at New Line, it coming back, them like, why would anyone think that this is like going to be a surefire hit?
Iron Man not having the recognizability of some of the other stuff they'd sold and made.
Tom Cruise passing. After some time, writers Art Markham and Matt Holloway came in with a contemporary pitch on how to introduce the character. Their whole thing was that we should move the action to Afghanistan, we should see Tony get blown up, and then flash back and figure out who he is. They had a ton of contributions, but that was the main thing, the hook, says Latcham. This is the story that would be the one to get made, but not before being changed quite a lot. Even quite late into production, from what I can gather based on comments from Feige, concept art, quotes from the cast even, and the original story was still quite different. Now, because it changed quite a lot, some of the things I mentioned might not have been all true at the same time, but originally, the Mandarin was going to be the main villain. This made it really quite far into development of the film, as well after Bridges was cast to be Obadiah Stane. So,
right, okay.
I have a script of Iron Man from 2007.
From 2007.
This is the one that I actually took notes on. This is the one that I read alongside the film. This script is, unfortunately, this revision is the only one that doesn't have a month or a day on it. It just has the year. Along the right-hand side has got, let's say, 15 revisions listed on it. It is saying that this is, I don't understand I think that they're all just different colors, but this one is called Salmon Number 2. Some of them are green, yellow, pink, blue, white, tan, cherry, goldenrod. Script Salmon Number 2 is the only one that doesn't have a date attached to it. I think because current date scripts are meant to be the ones that are the most secretive a little bit. Not that this is like illegal. This is just on the internet. But this script is the one that is, from what I can gather, one of the latest scripts that was used in the film. There's still a lot of changes in here. There's no Mandarin in this one. But this is the one that would have been brought to set from what I can tell.
Okay. Because I was going to say, the movie comes out May 2008.
Yes.
So it's fascinating to me we're still talking about revisions of scripts in 2007. I mean, the
oh, we'll get there.
Like, I kind of can't believe they made the film in as short a time as they did. I mean, any time in 2007, it could be January or December, but assuming it's something more like April, May, June, July, that's like, fuck, that's a tight turnaround. Especially when it's not a particularly accurate showing of what we actually got in the final product.
So this one is close. Most of the changes are dialogue, not structure. There are some changes, but a lot of the edits in this could have easily been changed in the edit. So it's scene rearranging as opposed to scene restructuring. But there are some changes in here that are fundamental, but those ones we will actually talk about directly. The Mandarin would be the mystical villain of Asian ethnicity that we all know and hate. But he was also going to be a technological rival of Tony's. One instance of the script included Stane being the red herring of the villain of the story, only for the Mandarin to be digging a literal tunnel under Stark Industries to steal Tony's suits, and then for him to become the Crimson Dynamo, a very famous Iron Man villain.
Okay.
He would then at some point battle in China. I'm not sure at what point this happens. Anyway, it would have been a very different movie still. So this is what I mean by I'm not too sure exactly if these are the same versions of the script or different. Mandarin digging a tunnel under Stark Industries, maybe revision D, maybe revision F was them fighting in China. I don't have that information, unfortunately.
Just one of the past versions had some of these. Yeah.
These could all be true at the same time. None of these could be true at the same time. According to concept artist Phil Saunders, quote, early on in development, there was going to be a big battle between Iron Man and the villain at the time, the Crimson Dynamo. There was a sequence where Tony and Rhodey got together in the garage with a bunch of leftover equipment from the Stark warehouse, and they thought they'd bulk it all onto the Mark III. The result would have been the War Machine armor.
Right, okay.
So this would have been big Gatling gun.
Yeah, a lot of missile launchers and lasers and yeah.
So there are some images of this in the Iron Man art book, and honestly, the design is really bad. The shoulder mountain gun is sort of inbuilt into like the front left breast. It's weirdly proportioned, much more mechanical. The forearms are huge. They look like they have guns in them. There's stuff on
Gatling nipple.
Yeah, there's like stuff on his belt and hips, and the joints in the limbs are like really tiny compared to the calves and the thighs. It doesn't look like a person can fit in there.
Right.
I wrote here, it's very Iron without the man. In this version, Stain was more of a supporting character. Bridges even recalls the phone call he got from Favreau, where he was told that he had been moved from being a supporting role in the film to the main antagonist. So he was on the old version of the film and was fully ready to be not the main bad guy.
Yep. Can I ask, how did Favreau get attached to this? Do we know that?
Yeah, we do talk about it. It's not really much of a story. He kind of just joins. I do quote a couple of times about why he's in and where he is. It's a little bit out of order in this part because a lot of the time it's really hard to tell exactly where in the order things take place, especially when it comes to the scripts, because Holloway and Markham, they were attached. So they were writing the film prior to Favreau. And so Bridges only would have come on after Favreau. But it's more about just providing context to how long some of these ideas stayed in line. But my next sentence is Latcham's next job was to get a director.
Right, okay.
Here's Latcham. I remember calling agents and saying, if you send me the list of people that you think are going to direct the movie, you're going to be wrong. Send me the list of everybody else that you don't think is right for the movie, because that's where we're going to find the interesting voices. It's kind of cool.
That is a bold strategy.
Pretty bold. Definitely a guy that's never done this before.
Send me the list of people who you don't think can get the movie done.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Favreau.
I'm still... Oh, yeah.
No, sorry, go.
No, nothing. I was vamping.
Jon Favreau was then approached by Marvel. Bennett writes, Favreau already had a long-standing relationship with Marvel and Arad from when he played Foggy Nelson in Daredevil. He kept in touch over the years, so there was a personal path to asking for a meeting. His previous two films, Elf and Zathura, is what got Marvel interested in him. Elf was a funny, successful film that was approachable, and while Zathura was not financially successful, it was a very technically impressive film that leaned heavily into practical effects and reportedly impressed the folks at Marvel Studios. Downey, in an interview with Chris Nolan, describes this in a Wired interview. Quote, I did a movie called Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Jon Favreau did a movie called Zathura. They both tanked, and we were both really hungry to do something that would make an impact.
Interesting.
Bennett quotes Favreau, I think there was a Moneyball attitude back then, getting good value for your money and drafting good talent for the salary cap that you have. I think that was always part of the metric, and they were very collaborative. I didn't feel like my arm was being twisted in any way, except that there was this looming idea that it had to come in at a certain price.
That's pretty reasonable, really. That's just budget stuff. That's fair enough.
So originally, they actually kind of pitched him two ideas. They pitched him Iron Man and the Hulk.
Oh, okay.
He seems not interested really in the Hulk. He liked the TV show growing up, but he's like, I don't have this in me. However, Bennett quotes him. Iron Man, however, seemed kind of cool. That was the one they were pitching to me. It was a hero that I knew. It wasn't necessarily a hero that I gravitated to when I was young, but now as I was older, I thought it was cool because you could have an older actor play that character. Tony was a conflicted person, so it was an opportunity to tell a complex story.
Fair enough. I reckon the results of that speak for themselves in the final product.
It's really funny. Like, there are a lot of problems when this film is being put together, which we're going to get to. But even then, at no point do I feel like that this film was heading in the wrong direction. Like, it's a really shockingly smooth forward motion, aside from one speed bump, which will be quite obvious when we get to it. But like, it's often like a film that it's just kind of one of those, like, the right people with the other right people coming together to make a really cool
totally
film. And it shows on screen.
Yeah.
Favreau was working on another project at the time called The Princess of Mars, which is an adaptation of the Edgar Rice Burroughs story for Paramount, with writing duo Mark Fergus and Hawk Ostby. With writing duo Mark Fergus and Hawk Ostby. After it was cancelled, Favreau brought on the duo onto Iron Man to write their own revision of the one written by Markham and Holloway, which is pretty common. Like, someone will write a story, put it together, someone else will rewrite it as a screenplay, do a revision. That's not even necessarily replacing Holloway and Markham. They're actually still attached to the project, and it's becoming now a very collaborative writing process between the four writers. When casting a conflicted person, as Favreau said, to help tell a complex story, Robert Downey Jr. seems like the obvious choice right now, but back then it was such a gamble. Not everyone was into it.
Yeah.
Robinson and co., right? While all four writers plus the director labored on the script, Favreau and Marvel Studios turned their attention to a crucial issue: which actor would actually speak all of this dialogue?
Right.
Which is a funny way to write that.
Yeah.
The first actor to join what would become the Marvel Cinematic Universe was Terrence Howard, who would play Lieutenant Colonel James Rhodey Rhodes, the best friend and conscience of Tony Stark. Not yet famous as the leading man of the show Empire, Howard was coming off an Oscar-nominated turn in the movie Hustle and Flow. That was a huge get, Markham recalled. Howard, a Marvel comic fan, signed on for a 3-picture deal knowing his character would become the superhero War Machine later on.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
sensible.
Very sensible. It's important to note that Robinson & Co.'s book, they mentioned specifically that Terrence Howard was the first one to come on board prior to Downey. The first actor cast in this new franchise, first actor cast by the studio. Favreau also mentioned this at some point, I think at Comic-Con 2007, when he's introducing everybody. But it's not actually announced until after Downey's cast. I don't particularly know why. I couldn't find any real reason for that, aside from, I guess they wanted to start with their lead, but it's not crazy to think that you're going to get someone else before you get your lead. So I'm not really super sure why the reports came out like a day or two after Downey was cast, but it was how it ended up being.
I mean, the thing is, I didn't even know about Iron Man, let alone who Iron Man's best friend and who his like secretary and who his father's best friend who now runs the company were, like, at the time. You know, like, I imagine, like, no one wants to hear about War Machine in 2007 when we hardly even know who Iron Man is. But
it's still trade news of actor attached to project. Like, that can be anyone. You know, that could be a character that's entirely made up. Like, it doesn't really matter.
But maybe they were trying to make more of a splash than that. You know, like, maybe it was like, we think we can if we bundle these all together, and like all together, it is a bit of a splash with RDJ, who is coming off a bit of a rough turn, with Terrence Howard, who is, as you just said, coming off an Oscar nomination or something, wasn't it, or Academy nomination?
Yeah.
Gwyneth Paltrow and Jeff Bridges. That is a great core cast right there.
It is a really good core cast.
I do think starting with just Terrence Howard would be a bit of a wet fart.
but the other thing that it could mean is that if you get someone like Terrence Howard, who is exciting, wouldn't that potentially drive up the excitement around the project for a potential bigger actor who might not have considered Iron Man until they're like, oh, maybe I actually really want to work with this guy if this guy thinks it's interesting. We'll get to it a little bit later, but that is the case with Robert Downey Jr. Bridges comes on, Paltrow comes on because Downey's there, and they're like, I want to work with that guy.
Interesting.
It's weird. Like, I don't like. It's also just a thing that, like, usually when a contract's signed, any news is good news. It's not common, I think, for an actor, short of them being a surprise, like, you know, like a Matt Damon in Interstellar. It's just surprising that someone who's going to be on the poster isn't like announced as they're signing. And, you know, like the publicist as well would probably want to drum up excitement for their own career so they can get more roles after that, you know? Anyway, every single interview, remark, and quote I could find about Terrence Howard being in Rhodey has him being Rhodey in the MCU has him shouting from the rooftops about how excited he is to eventually become the armored hero War Machine. I found some conflicting reports about exactly what he was paid for the film, but it seems to be around $3.5 to $4.5 million. Here's a quote from
payday.
It's a very good payday. Here's a quote from Terrence in an interview with Tim Estilios. Quote, "My father was a fan of Iron Man. I was a fan of War Machine. So I was privileged to be that. I called him and I said, Dad, I was like, Abu, did you know that when you were reading that comic book that inside your loins was a child that would play War Machine?"
Oh God.
It's really weird.
And that's not only saying that, but then repeating it back a second time to a reporter.
You know, War Machine, the physical manifestation of it. It's a very strange way to describe it. And like, the unfortunate thing is that like especially back then, I really liked Terrence Howard as Rhodey. I thought he was really good. I think Terrence Howard's a really good actor.
I thought he did fine, yeah.
He's clearly gone off the deep end in some form, but
in the time since.
Yes, in the time since. Even honestly, just after Iron Man, which like we don't speak about that because I think that's an Iron Man 2 story. But
okay.
He is unfortunately so excited in a way that I honestly can't really feel anything other than bad for him that he doesn't get to be War Machine, because he is
totally.
He does not stop talking about how excited he is to be War Machine. He loves that character.
And he's like personally excited. Yeah. That is sad.
With the hunt for Tony still ongoing, a handful of other options were considered before Favreau met with Robert Downey Jr. from Robertson and Co.'s book. One was 38-year-old Jim Caviezel, best known for playing the title role in Passion of the Christ, who would decline the role of Cyclops in X-Men several years prior. But it was 38-year-old Timothy Olyphant, grimly conflicted turn as Sheriff Seth Bullock on HBO's Deadwood, that made him, quote, the one everyone was rooting for, according to one Marvel insider.
That would have been cool.
Yeah, it would have been good.
He's good fun. Like
he's great.
He's just, I think, just fun in everything I've seen him in. But
Favreau had one other name in mind: Sam Rockwell. Also 38, a character actor then best known for his leading turn in George Clooney's antic movie Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. Sam Rockwell famously ended up as one of the villains in Iron Man 2 as Justin Hammer, where he was confirmed in the role. When he was confirmed in the role, he was quoted in MTV saying, We had a phone conversation about it, specifically talking about Iron Man 1. We had a phone conversation about it, and then I didn't hear anything, and that was it. Timothy Olyphant, however, a favorite at Marvel, again, before seeing Downey, actually recalls doing a screen test.
Wow.
Now, that has unfortunately not been made public, but he recalls it on Conan O'Brien. And I don't know if you've ever seen Olyphant on Conan, but talk about two people that get each other on a comedic level. They are fucking hilarious at each other. This is Timothy Olyphant on Conan. I know that a wonderful actor, Robert Downey Jr., and we had screen tested on the same day. And I'm still waiting to hear back. This is like 2014 or something, or 2017. Yeah. You know, the superhero movies are huge. It could be a real game changer. Yeah, I'm guessing it's perfect. So I don't know, these things, they get caught up in development. You know what I mean? So we'll see. I love that, man.
It's very good. For people who don't know Timothy Olyphant, he's the sheriff from Justified.
Yeah, I love him in Justified. He's
Cobb Vanth in Mandalorian, the another sheriff of that town that Mandalorian rolls through that are dealing with the big sandworms.
He's a sheriff in Deadwood. He plays an actor who's playing a sheriff in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And he's also in the Santa Clarita Diet.
Right.
Another actor that was offered the role, who was the star of Children of Men, which was co-written by Ferguson Otsby, actually, was Clive Owen. He got as far as being offered the role and turned it down. Feige comments on this at an address he did at University of Southern California, which is his alma mater. The direct reports. Quote, "When we were casting the role of Iron Man, we looked at so many different actors. We had to find the perfect mix of heart and strength and charisma. Being our first Marvel film out of the gate, the stakes could not have been higher. The success of the film and the future of our entire studio rested on the shoulders of this one person, and it was not an easy task. But together with my team and our casting directors and our director, Jon Favreau, we culled down our list, we pinpointed the right guy, and we extended an offer to our top choice, an actor who checked all of the boxes, who we were confident would be a hit. And his name, of course, was Clive Owen," which is a really funny way to bait that whole group of university students expecting him to say Downey Jr.
Yeah, totally.
He passed. He was not interested.
I'm looking at Clive Owen now. I've definitely seen him in some things. He was in like Inside Man and a bunch of series.
He's a really good actor.
I recognize him, but like I don't.
Yeah,
I don't know that I see this for him.
He's an actor that I think should actually be in more things. Because he's very good. He would not be right for this. He's not. He's not a fun actor. He's very serious and he's really good at being serious, but I never sit there going like, oh, what a riot that Clive Owen film was. You know, it's like watching a Daniel Day-Lewis film. It's like, right, I want to sleep. Because I'm exhausted. I think it's funny to hear that Owen passed on the role because everything else that I found frames Downey as, quote, the only choice for Favreau and Feige. Perhaps more mythologizing, perhaps just prior to them even knowing about Downey. We don't know the time frame, but clearly not the only choice at some point. Previously, Downey was not at all a bankable star. Throughout the 90s and the early 2000s, most news stories about Robert Downey Jr. involved him either being arrested, going to jail, or going to rehab. He struggled with drugs and alcohol for years, which caused him to serve some serious jail time. But after finally staying sober and marrying his second wife, Susan Downey, Robert Downey Jr. was ready for a comeback. So Susan Downey, still married to Robert Downey Jr. She is really quite important to his career, honestly. She's one of the ones who tells him, you got to do a thing. You really got to do this thing. She often pushes him to do stuff. She's one of the reasons he did Oppenheimer. She's one of the reasons he did Iron Man. On the Endgame Blu-ray, in a featurette titled Setting the Tone, casting director Sarah Haley Finn remembers what it was like seeing Robert Downey Jr. for the first time. Quote, "I had just been hired to cast on the first Iron Man. Jon Favreau was on board at the time, and I remember asking him in a meeting with everyone, tell me all the qualities that you think are most important: fast, quick-witted, funny, dynamic, and a bit troubled, confident, and brilliant. And all of those things. And all we really kept coming back to was Downey."
Yeah. That is a complex brief for a character, especially when you're just trying to get that from like vibes and from impressions. That is a character needing to be a lot of things. That is tricky.
Yeah. Like what a whole thing.
Yeah.
I also wanted to quickly mention a quote from Christopher Nolan in a Variety article after Oppenheimer came out. Christopher Nolan says on Robert Downey Jr., with anybody you work with actors, you're looking for someone kind of, with anybody that you work with actors, you're looking for some kind of connection emotionally or empathetically. You're looking for some kind of generosity. He has this incredible generosity of spirit. It means that when he's in a scene with other people, he's making sure that they are all doing their best, that they are all able to bring the best to their table. He's helping them clarify those emotional connections. He then went on to say that I've always wanted to work with him, being Robert Downey Jr. I've always seen that in his work. And he has had such charisma as Tony Stark. Him playing Iron Man is one of the most consequential casting decisions that's ever been made in the history of the movie business. I wanted to give him the opportunity to lose himself in a part, lose himself in another human being, the way great actors love him. Christopher Nolan refers to him as one of the most consequential casting decisions ever.
Yeah. I mean, he's not wrong.
No, he's completely correct.
And that's something that I don't think is particularly hyperbolic to say. Like,
no,
it has always felt like Robert Downey Jr. was a natural fit for that character. Even when I was only being introduced to that character in this movie through Robert Downey Jr.'s performance, it always felt like a natural fit. Like what we were seeing was very authentic to what we were meant to be seeing here. It was an accurate and I guess apt portrayal of the story and the characters they wanted to show us and tell us in that movie.
In the reign of Marvel Studios, Matt Holloway is also quoted as saying, "John, I felt in his bones that it should be Robert and fought for him to the point of saying it's going to be him or it's going to be me."
Wow.
Now, to be completely clear, him or me doesn't mean that there was a clash between Favreau and Marvel and Marvel Studios. Feige and Maisel were in. It was New York they had to convince. Marvel Entertainment were not keen on the risk involving hiring an actor with such a volatile past.
Yeah.
I think it's fair enough, but I think that this is just another one of those things where like so many struggles are going to come from this one spot in the company of Marvel that like you can look back on this and say like, of course they were the ones who were concerned. Yeah, like Downey is not a safe bet, but
no, not at this point in time.
No. But I think that when you've got the two heads of your studio, the director, the writers, the casting director, all saying it should be him, then I think it's really actually irresponsible to still hold your ground as a like businessman.
Yeah, totally.
Especially because like, what are you hiring a casting director for if you're not going with what they say?
Yeah. It's funny as well too, because like thinking about actors that are risks, I'm reminded of Jonathan Majors, who was cast to play Kang for all of these last few movies, and then he so publicly fell out amidst domestic assault charges that he was convicted with, and so Marvel had to pivot, and there was always a chance that Downey was going to be just completely off the table for 2 or 3 or 4 years if he relapsed. Yeah, I don't know. It was amazing. I mean, I think in terms of the product that we got and the entertainment we got from it, I'm glad for the sake of the product that didn't happen, but also for him personally as well. That would have been tragic.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And I think this whole endeavor is better off for that not happening.
Sarah Haley Finn goes on. John was in love with the idea of Downey playing the part, and we all felt so sure about him on a creative level because he wasn't instantly a slam dunk approval. I suggested we have some screen tests. I remember walking in with Robert Downey Jr. on the day of the tests. He was laughing in great spirits and completely at ease. He got in front of the camera and started saying the lines. Now, the audition tape for Downey, he did 3 screen tests. They're available on the Iron Man Blu-ray. They're available on YouTube. They're incredible. They're really incredible. It's 3 scenes, which we know from the film. It's a scene with him and a bunch of soldiers in Afghanistan. And it's them just throwing stuff back at each other.
Right.
There's a scene where he is talking to Rhodey after Rhodey has found out that he is Iron Man, and it's him acting serious, saying like, I've got to do this. I've got to get my weapons back. And it's the scene with the reporter where the reporter's asking him questions and he's deflecting while also hitting on her. So you get charismatic in a group, a little bit more lax. You get him on and flirty, and then you get him serious. And
like the pathos and the heart of the character.
And it's honestly incredible seeing all 3 of those because he's never done that before. Rather specifically, Tony. Robinson and co write, armed with that screen test, Maisel and Feige had a meeting with Ike Perlmutter, John Turitzin, and some other Marvel board members. We recommend Robert, Maisel says. Kevin and I gave our reasons why. We were nervous, we were in a public company and we were betting our future on Iron Man. Nevertheless, the answer from New York, according to Favreau, was under no circumstances are we prepared to hire him for any price.
Wow. That is firm.
Then, on the 29th of September, 2006, leaked onto the Ain't It Cool News, which is a website, which is a whole, Ain't It Cool News is the website I was talking about earlier that went down, then went back up. Ain't It Cool News is one of the single most impactful news websites for movies ever. I need to preface this so hard by saying the main guy that was running Ain't It Cool News sucks. He's the one I was talking about earlier. But the writing on Ain't It Cool News was awful. It was so misogynist and gross and edgy. And it was they were huge in 2004 because print hadn't made its way onto the internet yet. And Ain't It Cool News managed to get a huge following as Reddit popped up and then became like a default website for Reddit. And then was so impactful that people who were in film would leak stuff to the people who run Ain't It Cool News in the hope of shifting the way they wanted things to happen. And it was so impactful that the Superman film that was being written and directed by J.J. Abrams called Superman Flyby was killed because of the reaction to Ain't It Cool News's impressions of the script that they were given. Very this happened multiple times. Ain't It Cool News is responsible for the life and death of so many films.
That's wild.
It's a window into time. And then Ain't It Cool News dropped off really heavily because their website looks identical to what it did 20 years ago.
Right. Okay.
As well as a whole host of really bad things that happen. Robert Downey Jr. has been cast as Iron Man is posted on the front page of Ain't It Cool News. The internet went absolutely nuts. How did that happen? Well, Reign of Marvel Studios states, uncowed, Favreau anonymously leaked the news that Downey was in talks to star as Tony Stark. When movie fans on the internet reacted to that planted story with overwhelming enthusiasm, the New York executives finally acquiesced.
That's awesome. It's so good.
Now, I don't quite...
Stick that in your pipe and smoke it.
I don't quite agree with the characterization that the internet was overwhelmingly enthused with the news, only because from what I could gather, the internet was kind of split between being genuinely excited at the concept of Downey being Stark, but also I also saw plenty of apprehension. Not a lot of inherent I hate this is awful, what are they doing? But there's a lot of just okay, we'll see how they go. But it was an interesting choice, I think, for everyone, no matter which way you felt about it. There was intrigue online about his casting. So much so that after Downey officially signed on, the rest of the cast followed relatively quickly. Bridges came on as Obadiah Stane, Gwyneth Paltrow as Virginia Pepper Potts, Terrence Howard's James Rhodes was officially announced in the following months. In an interview with CBR...
Pepper's first name is Virginia?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. In an interview with CBR...
that.
Yeah, I think they mention it once or twice. I think Tony calls her Virginia as like a cheeky thing every now and again.
Like a rib?
Yeah. Yeah. It would be like Tony, it'd be like Pepper calling him Anthony.
Yeah.
In an interview with CBR, Mark Fergus, Hawk Osby, Art Markham, and Mark Holloway, the four writers responsible for the screenplay for Iron Man, are interviewed and quoted. The next section largely pulls from that story. It's a really, really good story because the four writers are speaking really quite frankly about what it was like to create the story. They're sort of going back and forth a little bit around additions that they made and changes that they made to the script, depending on which parts were already there or not. It's a really great article. The headline is "I am" in brackets writing and then Iron Man. It's really good. One thing that I wish I really could find some information on as well is that if they actually explored casting the Mandarin. while Downey was cast in late 2006 and Bridges in early 2007, the Mandarin was still in the script until at least mid-2007, as Bridges confirmed that when he signed on, he didn't expect to get in the suit. He's also not in the script. The Mandarin is also not in the script that I read, which is from 2007, but the month and date are redacted. So somewhere between mid-2007 and late 2007, I guess, because at some point they would have had to finish filming.
Yeah.
He was removed. Quote, I think there was too much story at first, and that's what the development process is like, Holloway says. The Mandarin had played a bigger role at first, but Obadiah Stane was always something that we could include in the movie as one of the great villains from the comics. So we said that maybe it was better to just put him with Tony and then give us kind of a father-son relationship. I think it's a juicier character dynamic to see this guy, Obadiah, who really cares about Tony like a son, but also feels that maybe he hasn't been appreciated for everything that he's done. Markham agreed, saying, there's real personality between a good guy and a bad guy. It's a lot more satisfying. So ultimately, Obadiah from the beginning was always the most satisfying choice for the opener. Fergus and Osby have a pretty impressive history considering how relatively short their credited films are. They haven't just worked on Iron Man, but they also wrote for one of the screenplays for Children of Men, which was where Clive Owen was in, and also is arguably one of the biggest inspirations for The Last of Us. Worked on Cowboys and Aliens, which is directed by Favreau after he finished Iron Man 2, and are also the creators and executive producers for the series of The Expanse for Amazon. And they were on that show as creators for the entire 6 years. So,
yeah, wow.
So they only wrapped Expanse back in 2022.
That was really well received, wasn't it?
Yeah. Finally, the last person of the core creative team I want to bring up is a man named Peter Billingsley. Longtime collaborator with Jon Favreau and child star as Ralphie in A Christmas Story, Billingsley was brought on to be an associate producer on Iron Man. He scattered through the deleted scenes, so I thought I'd give him an intro here, plus he's already got another very important role, Kerry. Billingsley plays the scientist William Gunter Reaver in Iron Man. Who is that? He's the man that is yelled at by Obadiah Stane about not being able to build an arc reactor in a cave with a box of scraps.
Mr. Balding Man.
Mr. Balding Man. And I wrote here, Billingsley isn't even bald, but in an interview with Vulture, he says, quote, I remember Jeff Bridges had to shave his head for the role of Stane, and that was a challenge. So the way I came up with my look was, I'll tell you what, I'll do this role and I'll shave a trench in my head as a sign of solidarity.
Yeah.
And then I
did see that hair when I was watching it this time around. I'm like, that's a really weird haircut kind of thing. Like, it's like a really, really defined balding pattern. Yeah. And it didn't occur to me to think that isn't how people bald.
And then I just wanted to explore the look of the character, so I went with the Solo mustache and glasses, which is definitely not the way I look in my normal life, and nobody recognized me at all.
That's really funny.
So as we're aware, Peter Billingsley did reprise his role as William Gunter Riviera in Spider-Man Far From Home. He did come back for that. He's actually one of the executive producers on the film and is a longtime collaborator of Jon Favreau.
Yeah, right. That's funny. And there's the origin point of the name of this show as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're gonna have a break.
Good plan.
We'll be back in a few minutes and we'll get into the actual development of the film. Moving further into the visual concept phase, this next part is going to primarily pull from the book Art of Marvel Studios' Iron Man by John Rhett Thomas. When tasked with conceptualizing Iron Man for the big screen, there are three names that really stick out. The first is Adi Gravnov. Thomas writes, the main inspiration for the look of Iron Man comes directly from Adi Gravnov. First, from his comic book work for Marvel, and then his invaluable work with the film's concept artist. For someone who had never worked on a film before and who was coming from profoundly misunderstood and underrated world of comic art, Gravnov and his visual concepts drew some seriously strong praise from the Iron Man's crew of veteran film artists.
That's a really cool sort of accolade to be handing, or to put at Gravnov's feet there and say, like, because I love the idea of a comic book artist getting to actually put their mark on one of the most influential comic book movies of all time.
Yeah, and for him to be such a core member of that, I think is really cool as like a validating of your work sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas also quotes a visual effects supervisor. John Nelson is the name of the visual effects supervisor. It's impossible to overstate Ali Gravnov's influence. I'd carry around Extremis, Gravnov's influential Iron Man comic, as our Bible. I'd show the pages of his comic art off to everyone, and I'd say, if there's any way we can make it look like this, it's good. The next one of those names is one that you might have heard of before, which is Ryan Meinerding. Thomas has this to say. The earliest renditions of Meinerding's concept art were grounded in the notion that Mark I was assembled from the cave's box of scraps. Director Jon Favreau, inspired by Adi Gravnov's style in the Iron Man comic, requested keyframe art, a drawing that captures certain design elements of a character or setting, to show flamethrowers implanted in the Mark I's wrist. Now, Ryan Meinerding, who I mentioned last episode, he has since become the head of visual development for Marvel. He is one of the big dogs in terms of the visuals at Marvel.
Like the lead creative force kind of thing.
Yeah. His main job, aside from illustrating, is to ensure that all of the Marvel films feel visually consistent, because at some point the plan is to bring them together.
Right. Like he's determining the Marvel, the MCU style, basically.
Yes. Meinerding was brought on as an illustrator for Iron Man and was first tasked with designing Mark I armor. Since then, he's worked on over 23 MCU films, 5 shows, designed countless costumes and scenes, and is now the vice president and creative director of visual development at Marvel Studios. Turns out I wrote down his job title.
That is a weighty resume.
He also designed Daredevil's costume in season 1 of the Netflix show.
Oh,
yeah.
That's fun. I'm going to look that up because I haven't seen it in a while, but I don't think that's necessarily for right now.
And finally, Phil Saunders, who I mentioned earlier. He was responsible for some of the other concepts on Iron Man, such as the Mark II armor. Thomas writes, the Mark II suit was Stark's first attempt at Iron Man's suit from the comfort and capability of the workshop. Concept artist Phil Saunders' expertise gained from years in the automotive industry added a practical sensibility to the armor's highly reflective organic surfaces. So this makes sense. This guy has worked on cars for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Tony's got his hot rod. He's got his cars in the garage. He's a mechanic. All that stuff makes complete sense.
Yep.
From Robinson & Co.'s book, as the art team showed off their work, storyboard artist Stephen Platt said Downey eagerly posed in fight stances, playing out potential scenarios in front of the sketches taped to the wall. Quote, there's no action beats. There's nothing. It's literally Iron Man fights an army. He was like a little kid. He couldn't wait to get going. At roughly the same time Favreau was brought on to direct the film, legendary prop maker Stan Winston's studio sought after the Iron Man project. Stan Winston says in the behind the scenes, quote, I'd like to say, gosh, everybody was just clamoring after us to do Iron Man, but the fact of the matter is that the minute we heard that Iron Man was being made, we went after it. We're all Iron Man fans, and it's like the perfect thing for the studio. Stan Winston's studio has won multiple Academy Awards for special effects in the past. His legacy includes Terminator, Jurassic Park, The Thing, Aliens, Predator. His prop warehouse is amazing. There's a ton of wonderful shots of his warehouse in the behind the scenes, and it's just full of like amazing film history stuff. Like they've got xenomorphs. There's got like an a Predator head, and there's like maybe like the robot from Short Circuit might have been in there, and like there's just so many things from so many films. It was often Stan Winston.
Yeah, I had to say when watching this movie the other day, I thought the visual effects of this movie stood the test of time exceptionally well.
Yeah. Like it is no small part to that studio. Like they were the ones who were tasked to bring the illustrations into 3D and then physically make the suits for the scenes that included Downey or the stunt people to wear the suits. Like they were the ones to do that.
Well, that's what I was thinking too when watching how this film integrated the visual effects into the actual production. there was so much practical that was brought in to seamlessly merge those. Like when Tony shoots the glass in his warehouse, they didn't fake that glass. That glass was there and they smashed it. And even more than that, it's part of the script that, Pepper is then walking past all the broken glass. And that's how she can get in. Oh, well, no, that's how Rhodey can get in. Because the warehouse is the workshop isn't locked because the glass is broken. Like the fact that it was shown being practically destroyed really helped to sell everything that's going on there. And he's wearing the prototype of the arm blaster when he does it. Like it and the way the workshop moves with the blast that gets, it's all really, really well done.
The Mark I suit, when he's hitting walls and punching goons, and when he's talking to Jensen as he's dying, looks incredible in those scenes. Like there's so much close up of the suit. It's like, while the lighting is helping, hide any of the rough edges, it looks so good. It looks so good. After the design of the armor had been finalized, Winston Studio was responsible for making it tangible. One of the biggest reasons that the suit in Iron Man looks so good is it's so funny we keep talking about stuff just before I get to it in the script. Looks so good and then begin to look less real or more digitally placed later on is due to the fact that as the movies went on, scenes with Iron Man had fewer and fewer pieces of the suit physically made, which means that there weren't many references almost at all, especially in the scenes with Mark I, which look phenomenal because a lot of them are literally real.
Again, thinking even of just like Age of Ultron, like how many different lighting conditions is Iron Man in that movie? Like they are going all over the planet in that movie.
And it doesn't look great.
No, it's like, it's not awful, but it's not impressive in the same way this was.
It's my issue with Spider-Man is that he's never once looked real in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It does my head in. Again, showing off just how enthusiastic and engaged Downey was in the process. There's a lot of clips in the behind the scenes of him walking around the Stan Winston studio, cracking jokes and sharing his opinions and his thoughts on the work that's being done. So much so that Winston himself says, quote, "Robert Downey Jr. is a consummate professional. He is so into anything that he gets involved with and easy to work with. He's not someone who is going to whine about the fact that he's got to be inside the suit. He knows what our problems are. He's worked with the guys very closely and he makes himself a part of the process."
That is interesting considering that it sounds like Downey was a large part of why practical suits were used less and less going forward through the MCU.
So yes and no. So in this film specifically, as we get towards the end of the film, a lot of what was filmed towards the end was the final fight. At this point, I think Downey was really feeling it physically. And so there were some scenes where he was wearing less and less of the suit. That's not why those scenes, I think, look perhaps not as well put together visually around the suit tech. We'll get to those scenes a little bit later, but there are some scenes where he did not actually want to get into the suit and he was really struggling with it. And so they had to digitally replace quite a lot of it.
And just to be clear, I was referencing future movies as we go through the MCU.
And the difference there is more the fact that as the films go on, it's later and later in the process that designs are finalized. Because they are tweaking. And so, for example, the white and red suits in Endgame, the time travel suits, were never physically made. And they were decided months after they had filmed. It's why they look really bad.
That shit, honestly.
Yeah. We're going to get to all of the why around that stuff at some point soon as well.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Stan Winston himself was never able to work on Iron Man directly as his illness was getting the better of him. But this is an excerpt of the tribute to Stan Winston in Thomas's book. Quote, "When Stan came in to see the Iron Man suits, something remarkable happened. He was struck with nothing negative or constructive to say. Stopped in his tracks, only a huge smile on his face as he slowly walked around the figures, taking them in. We waited for the critique. It didn't come. Instead, we heard him say, 'This is the greatest thing I've ever seen you guys do.' And that is saying a great deal because there was so much from the past that was remarkable. So he died.
That's so lovely.
Really nice, right? We'll get to the ramifications of what I'm about to talk about in a later episode, but during the pre-production phase of the film, Marvel HQ, specifically not Feige, had sent their best and brightest comic creators to Marvel Studios to ensure that the West Coast studio was headed in the right direction. Now, what does this sound like we just spoke about?
Sounds like the committee.
Now, this was not the committee. Alan Fine is not there. There is no toy people there. This was just comic people. So this was Joe Quesada, Brian Michael Bendis, Mark Miller, and Avi Arad.
Okay.
Which is a veritable who's who of 2000s Marvel. But yeah, to sort of keep that in mind that they are around at this point. Later down the track, there is politics between a lot of these people, especially Quesada. But like for now, they're there because they want to make sure that the Iron Man movie's doing really well, and they're sent, on a mission by HQ. But they're also kind of interested in the process.
Yeah.
After the film is made its way into production, Favreau actually decides to keep them around on set. One of the decisions that Jon Favreau makes in the pre-production and production of the first Iron Man is going to change the course of Marvel Studios forever. This is called pre-viz, which is the process of animating storyboards. Some directors/writers like to create storyboards for their films. Often this can involve hiring an actual storyboard artist, but sometimes the director, with or without the writer, might create them too. It's not out of the ordinary for directors to not do this. It's not a thing that is required, but it's certainly more common when creating animated films or a film that might have a lot of animated sequences. It's a fundamental process that every Pixar movie goes through. They have an entire room dedicated to storyboards or animatics, where the lead creators of the film will kind of act out scenes for the film in front of other animators or anyone else that is going to get involved. There's a lot of really great behind the scenes, especially around like the Monsters Inc., Finding Nemo era, where they filmed all of those. They filmed all of those acting sequences where they've got these huge boards with little plaques, and they spend like 40 minutes just placing them in order. And then they gather everybody around and they're all standing up. I don't remember if anyone's sitting down. And then they're just acting out the scenes. And they've got big long sticks and they're going from storyboard to storyboard to storyboard to storyboard to storyboard, acting out the whole scene so the animators know the motions, they know the feelings, they know the tone. It's really cool. Guardians of the Galaxy director James Gunn is a huge proponent of storyboards. He famously storyboards everything himself and as a writer-director. He's posted dozens of them on his social media accounts, and I'm sure we're going to be looking at them when we get to his films. He sometimes will post storyboards of films that are currently still in production, but he'll pick the ones that you can just tell absolutely nothing by what's going on. And
it's just like a smear.
It'll be like a guy standing against like a line while he's holding like a ball, and he's just like, here's a scene from like Superman, and everyone in the comments is like, what the fuck is this?
Cheeky.
Yeah. Favreau, because of the time and budget crunch he was on with Iron Man, actually took the storyboards made for the film and turned them into animatics, and then brought the visual effects team in to turn them into actual shots. This is not nearly as common for it to go through that process, but it really fits with the very collaborative all-hands-on-deck approach to the first film. And he also said in the making of documentary that he had done this also for morale for the crew so they could get excited about what they were making.
That's interesting. And that's a fair point too, especially with visual effects.
Yeah.
And when a movie is so heavily relying on it, if you're not going to see the fruits of that labor for a while, I can see that really helping. Just being like, hey,
Totally.
This is how cool it's going to look.
Now, how does this decision affect Marvel Studios going forward? From an excerpt in the book, The Art of Marvel Studios' Iron Man, Josh Rhett Thomas talks about what previs is and one reason why Marvel adopts it so heavily. I personally think that this section is somewhat ignorant of some of the reasons why it's used so heavily, or it was just simply written prior to becoming an absolute foundation of the studio going forward. And it's sort of both, but I think it's a bit naive back then. That being said, who could have known what it was going to turn into for the movies going forward?
I mean, it's not just for the MCU now too. It's like how Hollywood does it for visual effects, right? Like it's a very, very, very common way to go about visual effects.
So not necessarily. only because one of the core differences that Marvel Studios has, which I do want to get to at some point, I just haven't been able to weave it in yet, is the way the studio is set up is so in-house from end to end. Most studios have got some in-house stuff, but they also license it out to production houses. And they've got their entire studios that are storyboard studios. There are concept art studios. There are sound mixing studios, all that stuff, right? Whereas Marvel do a lot of it in-house because they have not just because they know exactly the films they're going to make, but because they've hired people like Ryan Meinerding and they've hired people like Victoria Alonso, like Sarah Haley Finn to like, what's your job? I make Marvel movies. And so they are full-time working on the next one. There's no real breaks because there's always the next one. But it also means that because they can keep everything in-house, they can go so far ahead of schedule as quick as they can, which to them makes complete sense because why would they not want to get ahead of schedule? But it comes back to bite them. Thomas writes, for a film as heavily laden with gee-whiz action effects as Iron Man, Jon Favreau's two greatest assets during Iron Man's pre-production were his storyboards and his pre-visual effects teams. The latter group is responsible for what is known in the industry as previs, an elaborate undertaking wherein 2D and 3D concepts are adapted into fully realized animations of the complex action beats of the film as the expense budgets of films like Iron Man climb through the stratosphere. Previs gives the director and the producer a chance to practice tough shots and gain confidence on their way to principal photography. So this is before they've started filming.
Bloody hell. Okay.
I think the above paragraph is not untrue, but it's definitely unaware of what we have now, which is plenty of easy shots that are almost entirely animated because it's cheaper. Shots on the street, indoors, in controlled sets, realistic areas, etc. So many of them now are done entirely through compositing digital effects. On the first Iron Man, Favreau was getting the visual effects department to begin to work on shots prior to production beginning. It's a pretty economical way of making a movie, and when you've got some shots that you know are going to be locked into the final cut, I get it. I don't have as much of a problem with this when it's the director and the writers and the creatives on the film together doing this. A problem that we will start to see going forward is that Marvel Studios begins to employ these tactics for films that don't have a director, that don't have an attached writer, that have a producer, because like they say, they have a producer on a film who's on it from beginning to end. And so then what they do is they start to pre-viz a film that doesn't have a director or a writer or a star or a cast or a release date.
Right. They've put the cart before the horse.
Yes. I remember that saying. But it also means that there are some shots that you're locking yourself into doing without any real way of knowing if you should keep it or not. It's a real blend of backing your own authoritative vision versus giving yourself the freedom to say, actually, not this one, even though I love it. It's also no wonder why Jon Favreau was the man behind the Volume's biggest show, The Mandalorian, as it's a pretty similar concept to what he employed in Iron Man, realistically, except uglier. To editorialize a little bit more.
Oh, what?
There's more to this, but in later episodes. For now, production of Iron Man has fully begun. The entire shoot went for 74 days and was a wild ride for everybody involved. It's really funny to have
74 days. That is not a long time for a movie set of this scale, is it?
No. Well, I mean, look, I think it was on the shorter length, but it wasn't like sometimes you can do a film in like 28 days and then people talk about it, and every time I hear it, like my mind is blown. I'm like, how the hell did you fucking figure that out? It's really funny to have so much detail about the scripting process for the film, who was working on it when, only for the narrative surrounding the film to be something that is boiled down to Iron Man has no script, which is a very common thing that you hear quite a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely been the takeaway that people say when they talk about the behind the scenes of this.
One of the many reasons I wanted to begin this show, Kerry, is because the myth of Iron Man not having a script is a myth. And it is not the responsibility. It is not like that myth is not from the folks who made the film. It is not from Robert Downey Jr. It is not from Jon Favreau. It is not from Kevin Feige. But I think that there has been some language deployed to perhaps, again, mythologize some of the creatives on the film over others. I want to make it very clear, at no point do any of the 4 writers have they ever seemed to make any remark or statement that implied that they had felt hard done by someone else taking control of their script. I have quotes in here that talk about how lucky and amazing it was to work with someone who could really throw words around like Robert Downey Jr. But I think it's really important to know that Iron Man had a script. While I've read the script and it is very different on a word-by-word basis, structurally, it is largely the same film in the script that I've got below my hand.
I was thinking that like, because I did have some version of that sort of idea in my head.
Oh, so did I. It was one of the things that I thought I already knew when I was going into this.
Yeah. Yeah. And then watching the movie, I was like, there's a lot of complex shots here. Like they didn't just rock up to set and said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if like Tony like had a drinks machine that like popped out of the thing and after the Jericho.
I talk about that exact machine later in the script.
Yeah. But like that whole sequence, well, that's one of the sequences they screen tested for now that you've said that, right? Like he doing didn't you say that was, oh, okay. Pardon me.
No. Sorry. The 3 was the reporter, Rhodey, and sort of the opening scene, but a different version.
Oh, the fun V.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay. I got that confused with the Jericho demonstration.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
But yeah, no, with the Jericho demonstration, like they've got that whole like air cannon thing to do the blast behind them, and they've got to do the visual effects behind with the missiles being shot. They've got that whole contraption of the drinks and the ice and the fog, like it comes in. Like you don't just get to throw that together. That is a complex set of shots. It's like just 2 minutes of the movie. I was like, yeah, okay. There's definitely a lot here that had to be thought through first.
Absolutely, of course. It's a very common myth that surrounds the film, and also one of the reasons I started the show in the first place. However,
so where is that myth coming from?
So it is coming from some of the cast. And I think that they have just used words too loosely. But there is a lot of changes that were made to the script on set.
Okay.
This is sort of the next chunk of the story. But I don't really talk about exactly where that myth came from. So I will dispel that quickly, is that there are phrases that are used that I think people don't always know what they mean. And there are terms used that are used inaccurately. For example, improv and ad-lib are different to sat down and wrote an alternate version prior to filming. However, the phrase ad-lib, the phrase improv are used far too generously when describing parts of the scene which were rewritten just prior to filming.
Okay.
And so there is like, that is where a lot of the misconception came from. And also like people love they love a comeback story. They love Downey Jr. They love the concept that Downey Jr. improvised the line, "I am Iron Man." He did not improvise it. He perhaps on set,
like he was part of the workshop and part of the creative team that was trying to figure out how the scene needed to go.
Yeah,
right.
But he didn't improvise it. Improvise it is when you say it without thinking about it first. It is surprising everybody. It is working off somebody else. Ad-libbing
in the moment.
Yeah. Ad-libbing is replacing one word with another in a better way. It's not that. The ending of this script includes "I am Iron Man" in it. And like, look, that might have been rewritten after Downey had redone it. And that's fine, but ad-lib is not correct. Improv is not correct. Presented an idea and pitched it, wrote it even, might be correct, but we don't know those ins and outs. One of my issues is that I think that Marvel Studios themselves haven't actually done a strong enough job at actually fixing that misconception. And, the actors themselves often, like harmlessly or not, have often, referred to Iron Man as not having a script. And that's because, like, to the actors, some of them felt like they didn't have one. There's a lot of
because they were preparing for one thing and then told to throw that out.
Yeah. Like Jeff Bridges is one who often refers to it as like we didn't really have a script, but he does it in his Jeff Bridges way, where he's like, we didn't really have a script, man. Which is like, how much of it is that Jeff Bridges kind of being like a loosey goosey kind of guy. Yeah. So it's hard, but I think it is important to know that there were 4 writers on this film. Some of them stayed on for the entire time. Some of them came back later to redo some scenes. Like they got 4 people who are writing it, as well as Favreau, who's writing his own lines, and Downey, and some other people, which we'll get to. There was a script on Iron Man. Reign of Marvel Studios writes, shortly before the cameras rolled, Mark Fergus and Hawk Utsby cobbled together a functional screenplay drawing from years of brainstorming and failed efforts. Quote, we looked at everything, all the drafts from day one, even going back 15, 20 years. So they would have read the really crap ones that I read as well.
Yeah.
We just wanted to see what everyone had done, Fergus said. They had produced a shooting script in only 12 days, although Favreau didn't stick to it. The director had discovered that Downey was a performer who flourished when was allowed to improvise, and he planned to keep his set as spontaneous as possible. We continued to rewrite it all through the next 5 months on set nonstop, and it was a blast, Markham says. So Markham himself is saying, I'm there rewriting the script. I'm there with them. Maybe it's Downey's line. Maybe it's Favreau's line. Maybe it's Markham's line. We don't know line for line. We don't get that information. But some of it definitely is Downey. A lot of it is written for his cadence, for his speech pattern. He's got a very particular way of speaking. A lot of the dialogue that when I'm watching the film and reading at the same time is different. A lot of it is Downey's, and it makes complete sense why they went with the one on the script and not the one on the paper, because it just wouldn't work for Robert Downey Jr., the actor and performer.
Yeah.
So again, there definitely was a script. They didn't just always stick to it. When actually going through it and reading it, there's definitely a lot going on the page that's made it into the film with no small amount of retuning, though. I can fully understand why Downey and Favreau took it in the direction they did, though. After reading the screenplay and watching the film, it does seem like quite apparent that the changes they made I literally said that. Not saying the screenplay was bad, but what Downey does opposite Howard, Bridges, Paltrow, Sean Tobe, who plays Yinsen, is pretty special. In the special features, Jeff Bridges describes the spirit of working in Iron Man as a small independent art film in a funny sort of way. And Terrence Howard was also quoted saying that, quote, John recognizes that the script is the skeleton, the comic is the skeleton. What we're creating is real life, so he allows it to grow and to improv and to become something alive and three-dimensional. Howard loved improvising. One of my favorite scenes in the whole film has become the scene where it's him and Tony on the private jet and they're getting drunk.
I knew you were about to say that. and it's because the scene in the script is entirely different. And so they apparently what they did is they just covered the shot. They just got 2 cameras, put them on the plane, and they just let the 2 actors go. And it's great. The one in the script and some of the deleted scenes are worse. It gets kind of gross. In the book, Reign of Marvel Studios, an anecdote is shared about how Paltrow initially wasn't as comfortable ad-libbing as much. Quote, although Paltrow wasn't nearly as comfortable with improvisation as Downey, Favreau found a way to inject her personality into the script. He would jot down things Paltrow said during rehearsals and then repurpose them as Pepper's dialogue. For an unexpected comedy beat, Paltrow draws from her own life in the big party scene shot at Walt Disney Concert Hall, where Pepper tells Tony that she's not wearing deodorant. Right.
Favreau rules, man.
Yeah, that's really clever. That's a great way to just loosen your actors up a bit. That's good fun. To
bring them in, to allow them to feel like they can throw stuff in, like, oh, you just said the silly thing. I'm going to write it in because that's great. It works for Pepper, works for you.
Yep.
And further on from that, Favreau's controlled chaos reached its zenith with that scene, which came midway, with the next scene, which came midway through the shoot. John was really intense about it. Set director Laura Gaffin remembered, so she, like the rest of the crew, had no script to work on, no idea where the scene was going, and in some takes, Downey and Paltrow kissed. This is the scene in the concert hall.
This is the dance scene.
Yeah. So this scene, from what I can remember, is not actually in the script at all. So that one was let's set it up and do it. Let's see what we can find.
Right, okay. Was he just meant to rock up and confront Obadiah?
Well,
and
like
then...
a lot of the scene is them in the no, because the scene still has Paltrow and Downey going back and forth, but there's no Coulson in the scene, I don't think. The scene is primarily dancing, and then they go up to the roof for something else, and then Tony has to leave for Obadiah, but not for the same reason. But it's not a romantic scene in that moment. In some takes, Downey and Paltrow kissed. All of a sudden, they're going to the rooftop of Disney Hall and they're kissing, Gaffin said. And we're like, what the hell? This is one of those scenes where everyone from the studio is looking at you like you're crazy because it's 4 a.m. and you're doing 10 takes and you're running and telling them to do something completely different from the last time. Favreau said. Ultimately, in the editing room, Favreau spliced together a few different takes to make it look like Pepper and Tony almost kissed. Their big romantic moment, like the Mandarin, would have to wait. So the scene where they almost kiss and then they go back, that's actually a scene where they do kiss. And
I did think it was a little awkward watching that one.
Favreau paused it and rewound it. Yeah, it's a rewind.
You can't pull that off in most cases.
No, you
it looks
really
too
can't.
Unnatural.
Yeah, and it still looks pretty good. It doesn't look like it's a reverse scene, that's for sure.
Yeah.
There are many, many stories shared by the cast about days where they'd show up to set and instead of getting ready and acting, the first few hours would entail the stars of the day piling into Downey's trailer with Favreau and the writers and then deciding what they're going to do on set. Now, that is a very common occurrence. One of the stories I got from the set are from what I called the director's commentary. I want to be clear, there is no director's commentary. What there is, however, is a night in 2008 after the release of the film where Jon Favreau was invited to be a special guest at the American Cinematique program at the Aero Theater in Santa Barbara. During this event, Favreau surprised the audience with special guest Robert Downey Jr. to watch the film, perform commentary over it, and answer some questions at the end. Now,
that's cool.
I stumbled across this in a Reddit thread from 12 years ago. Someone recorded it then on their crappy 2008 phone, put it on a SoundCloud. Someone then downloaded that and then tried to clean up some of the audio and trim out some of the blank time at the front, re-uploaded it. It's really cool. It's really, really cool. It's got such few views. If you're really into it, I really recommend playing because it's really fun. They talk a lot about just sort of like on-set antics and stuff that, because it's not a proper thing and it's well before Disney and it's just after the first film and it's before Terrence Howard is fired. So they're still talking about Terrence Howard potentially being in a sequel. Like Favreau is really quite frank about stuff that he thinks isn't up to his standard in the film. Stuff like, I could have done that better. Like just like often just refer. And I'm like, dude, it's good.
Yeah.
It was never officially released. I don't think it was even officially recorded, which is honestly wild. Blah, 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 cell phone, imagine the quality. It's a really good listen though. From the commentary, Favreau says that one of the scenes which was written the night before shooting was the press conference scene. The version in the script is honestly quite similar. They do say...
So this is the final press conference, the end of the movie.
Yes. The biggest difference is in Downey's delivery of a lot of the lines, and also there's no Coulson in the scene. In the original version of the script, it's Pepper giving Tony the alibi, and they're not quite nearly as cutesy with each other.
Right.
Another scene that Downey and Favreau mention as the one they, quote, wrote on a cue card that day is the speech Tony gives just before the Jericho missile test. The story goes, and Downey has mentioned this a few times over the years, that the reason Tony is wearing sunglasses in that scene is so the camera doesn't pick up that his eyes are reading left to right while he's acting.
Yeah.
That's a really great anecdote. That one is almost word for word in the script itself. I'm not saying that it's not true. I don't know if it's true. Like, I don't not believe him, but I think it's a weird thing to lie about, but also it doesn't really quite solve in my head.
Do you think one of these scripts is including takes that were already shot? Like maybe this super up-to-date version that you've already got?
And like, look, I can imagine that sometimes happening because if you need to reshoot a scene, you need to know what the script is. And so why wouldn't you rewrite the script based on what's happening? But I also don't know what the rules are around that in terms of improvising and then changing the script into that, because it's also like Downey doesn't have a writing credit. And so presenting this, but it's probably a shared moment between the screenwriters and the actors, because it's not like actors want a screenwriting credit based on improvising. So like, but I don't know what that means when it makes it into the printed copy of the script. It's not word for word the same. He reshuffles some of the words to make it flow better when he speaks. So maybe that's just what he meant by, I want to rewrite this just to make it look a little bit better. I couldn't find a photo of that placard that he mentions, the cue card. And there are a handful of behind the scenes from the moment where he's doing the Jericho missile speech. You know, maybe it's not nearly as big as what I thought. You know, I'm imagining quite a large card, but like maybe it's not nearly that big because maybe the camera was really close. But you see some behind the scenes from that, and there's no placard that I could see. I don't know. It's a tricky one. I think it's honestly probably just somewhere in the middle. But I think that saying that Robert Downey Jr. wrote that scene that morning on a cue card in a Sharpie is perhaps a little bit of a over exaggeration. I just really wish I knew the date of this script. I really wish I knew exactly when this was, because I know the date of wrap for the film, and I know the order of sequences that they filmed it in, and so I could probably figure it out.
Right, as soon as you had even a month on the script.
Hawk and Mark, if you're listening, hit me up. You got my email.
Yep. Which one are we looking for? Salmon number 2.
Salmon number 2.
The date on salmon number 2.
Like all I can tell is that it's after July, because that's when the previous one is made. Wait, June. It's also worth mentioning here that in the next shot, there's a Stark Industries branded drink cooler that Tony quips about throwing one in for every purchase of 5 million or more, then says to peace. Yeah. That cooler automatically raises the drinks when you open it. It's actually just a box of the prop guy underneath pushing up the container, which is great. Yeah. That's just great.
Yeah. I would have bet money on that. As soon as I saw it, I'm like, there's no way they automated a fucking case. That's just a guy.
Yeah. In an interview with all 4 Iron Man writers, Fergus is quoted, quote, "You get to watch good material kind of go over the line and take it somewhere really special. He, Robert Downey Jr., has the ability to do that. So we'll take credit for every great moment that he comes up with. What we'll take credit for is giving him a springboard to do his Robert Downey Jr. thing and just be great. It was a real joy to work with people who are going to push you to be better than you think you can be." So they clearly don't have animosity towards the phrase, there was no script, Downey wrote this scene, blah, 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 blah. Like, and so
it definitely sounds like a collaboration on set, like a really open-hearted, generous, creative effort.
Yes. Infamously, the I Am Iron Man scene has been regarded as one of the great ad-libs by Robert Downey Jr. But I have a decent amount of trouble getting a first-hand account of Robert Downey Jr. or Favreau mentioning it specifically that it was an ad-lib or an improv by RDJ. Obviously, the reaction shot would make it an option for them. But the only real source I can find is from Ain't It Cool News, I've actually got 2 sources, not the only real source. One of the sources I can find is from Ain't It Cool News, which describes in an interview with Favreau and Robert Downey Jr., quote, "We had the I Am Iron Man ending, which seemed like a great idea, and it was, and then we had to make a whole second movie that takes that into account." Downey says, your problem. So again, it's in the script. They talk about it as an ending, which means it won't be the only one that they might have considered. In an article from IndieWire, Kevin Feige says, "That success inspired us to go further in the trusting ourselves to find balance of staying true to the comics and the spirit of the comics, but not being afraid to adapt and evolve and to change things." Talking about that line being such a huge change for what Iron Man is a character between having a secret identity and then making the first film in your franchise, rejecting the concept of secret identities.
Yeah, which was also big for superhero movies at the time.
Absolutely. All the big ones,
all the X-Men hideaway in the college or whatever it is.
Spider-Man Dark Knight was coming out this year.
Yep. Batman, Superman has always been secret identity thing.
Yeah. And historically, so was Iron Man.
Yeah.
It's a fine line, Feige continued. If you're changing something for no reason, that's one thing. But if you're changing something because you want to double down on the spirit of who the character is, that's a change we'll make. Tony Stark not reading it off the card and not sticking with the fixed story, him just blurting out, I am Iron Man, that seems very much in keeping with who the character is. Feige said he felt comfortable not removing Robert Downey Jr.'s ad-lib because it was something very much in keeping with the concept of the comics characters and what he could have done.
That sounds, the way that is phrased sounds like Favreau is, not rejecting the idea that it was an ad lib. You know what I mean? Like
Feige, but yeah, yes.
Oh, Feige. Sorry.
It's probably a line, but it's probably just not quite as an improv as one would expect.
Sure.
Because it's it's just not, right? Like you don't improv that and then have a reaction shot ready to go. You don't have.
True. They've got, you're right. They've got the shot of all the press jumping up, and
he can improvise it on the set as a thing that he was trying to pitch. He can work on it, but improvising is a different thing when you're talking about filming. I spoke to screenwriter Chris Perizzo about actors ad-libbing on set, specifically the I am Iron Man line, and this is what he had to say. Screenwriters scrutinize over the first line of dialogue their protagonist says. That line says everything about them and is our first hint at a theme. Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawlers is I'm sorry, I'm lost. Yes, he is, and he finds his place in the end. So was that an ad-lib? The first and last line, or was that writing? But I'm sure what possibly happened is that that it was in the script and everyone was unsure about it because of all the ad-libbing and losing the mark/theme of the story. But Downey tried it and it worked. So there probably was doubt, but I don't doubt at all that it was in the script before he said it, is what this other screenwriter also says. Whether it was in the script first, whether it was Downey, I think it's probably safe to say that they probably had a lot of options for a lot of those scenes. And even if they didn't have a lot of options on paper, they're so used to coming up with things. They're so used to figuring stuff out that it probably was an amalgamation of a handful of things. But we just don't have a tremendous amount of insight because we don't just get like the dailies, unfortunately. Fuck, that'd be cool if we did. Regardless of what happened, no one who worked on the film, writers included, have ever disputed it. A few other examples of the script being entirely rewritten between the actors and the writers on the fly is two of my favorite scenes in the film. The scene with Tony and Rhodey on the plane and the scene where Stain visits Tony and Pepper with the pizza.
Yeah.
Both of those scenes in the script have similar starting and end points, but how they get there is just so much more electric and engaging on the screen. As Bridges would say, it was like jazz, man. That scene where Stain shows up and he's got the pizza and he's telling Tony that went well and he's saying like, hey, let me get the engineers to take a look at your arc reactor. So much of that is entirely different to what's in the script. That was one of the scenes where I think I've heard Bridges specifically speak about the fact that they knew where the scene started and they knew where the scene ended. And they just were walking around trying to see what was the most interesting way of getting there. That scene is so good. The thing goes like, all right, like I'm going downstairs and he goes, come on, stay. And he's like, bye. He goes, bye, Obi. And he goes, go on, take some pizza. And he goes, all right. And he goes, take one more. Like it's.
Yeah.
And he goes like, I flew this in from Chicago or whatever. No, I flew this in from New York. Like it's so good.
Yeah.
Speaking of Bridges, in the art of Marvel Studios Iron Man, Jeff Bridges did the funniest thing. Quote from Thomas's book. When researching the part of Obadiah Stane, Iron Man's profoundly maniacal heavy, legendary actor Jeff Bridges left no stone unturned. He not only poured through decades worth of Iron Man comics, he turned to one of the oldest books of them all. Quote, I read the book of Obadiah in the Old Testament, Bridges recalls.
What?
Quote, a lot of the story that we're telling in this movie was in that book. And I thought, I wonder if Stan Lee read that or it was just a total coincidence. The 31st book in the Holy Bible and at 21 verses, the shortest, Bridges found that Obadiah carried with it a distinct overarching theme. Retribution is the mightiest of weapons. And for Obadiah of Tony Stark's world, his lust to weaponize retribution would result in the film's climactic armor war, a battle between the Iron Man and the Ironmonger that would rage from the streets of Los Angeles to the heavens above. Thomas likes to put a little bit of flair in that one, which I think is good fun.
Me.
It's worth pointing out that Stanley did not create Obadiah Stane. That was Dennis O'Neill and Luke O'Donnell. Dennis O'Neill was raised Irish Catholic, according to Wikipedia, so maybe he did. I did actually reach out directly to Luke McDonnell, but I haven't heard anything back. I found his social and I DM'd him on 2 different places, but he hasn't got back to me. Now to read to you the entirety of the Book of Obadiah. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Something I didn't realize about Obadiah Stane / Ironmonger is that due to Raza, the leader of the 10 Rings in the film, retrieving the parts of the Mark I armor for him, the Ironmonger's mask is based almost exactly off Tony's Mark I.
The Iron Man mask is based off of
the Ironmonger mask.
Oh, the Ironmonger mask. Sorry. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense.
It does make sense, but I think it also lends itself to the idea that, like, you know, the ghost of Tony's weapons are still haunting him and causing havoc and violence in his life. They don't really play into that, but I think that there was a really easy way for Tony to get like almost PTSD from seeing that mask again. I reckon there could have been a scene where they're face to face for the first time and he'd be like
maybe when like Tony's like passing out on the roof, like he like looks to the side and the mask is looking like back at him or something.
Yeah. You know,
it's,
I think there was a little bit more fun there that they possibly could have utilized, you know, like, say like, I know that face or something like that. Right.
There's also something to be said for how Stane could never create weapons or create new stuff the same way that Howard or Tony could.
Mm-hmm.
He was desperate to have something that cutting edge, but he had to take everything that Tony made in order to have something like that.
I don't remember if I included it in here or not, but my understanding is one of the actual only reasons why the Ironmonger mask is the Mark I or based off of that is because they were having some trouble for a good long while trying to figure out what the design of the Ironmonger was going to be, because it was originally going to be Mandarin and then Crimson Dynamo. And so they kind of just went, we're running out of time. Use the Mark I.
Yeah.
According to Ryan Meinerding, I tend to do illustrations that are geared towards getting actors interested in the project. At this point, we had Ironmonger design, but we didn't know who was going to be inside of it. Throughout the design process, it was still possibly going to be the Mandarin inside. I did this illustration to give Jeff Bridges the suggestion being, quote, you can get away with being inside the suit and still look heroic and cool. The illustration he's talking about also includes Jeff Bridges as Obadiah Stane, but with hair. He was actually not required, no matter what Billingsley says. Favreau said, like, we didn't actually force Bridges to shave his head. He just kind of wanted to because he enjoyed the character enough, which is fun. When bringing Iron Man,
rocks it too.
He rocks it. Like, he's got a great head of hair, but he also really rocks the bald.
Yeah.
When bringing Iron Man to the 21st century, and after finally deciding to not include the Mandarin in the film, the story still needed Tony's escape from captivity. These cave sequences were the first things shot on set in a way that's kind of romantic. The first time Downey is portraying Tony Stark on screen and is in the film is when he's captive in a cave, with Sean Tobe playing Ho Yen Sin. There's also a world where this doesn't happen. From Robinson & Co.'s book, sometimes completed sets would be torn down without having been used because an associated scene had been scrapped. The script changed so much, art director Susan Wexler said. We started building the cave where Iron Man is really conceived, when Tony Stark is kidnapped. That was the one thing that we knew we were going to be doing. It was 3/4 of the way done, and they said, maybe we don't do the cave. According to Wexler, Michael Reaver then stepped in saying, you know, the set's pretty much standing there. It'd be silly to not do it. Thank God for that.
Yeah. Bloody hell. I mean, what I don't even understand how that movie works.
Yeah.
Without that.
Yeah. Maybe they just do it out in the open, but still, it's not nearly as exciting. According to Reaver, they had the cave's temperature brought so far down that the frost on everyone's breath is real. Quote, from the beginning, I insisted that we freeze the cave to be true to the ideal. Everyone was very uncomfortable, but John insisted we go there for realism. We froze the cave down, and you can see the breath coming from Robert. It added a necessary sense of urgency and danger.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I was thinking, watching this movie, I was thinking about this movie as an origin story but also like the origin of the MCU and the origin of any MCU origin story, and how it pretty quickly feels like the origin stories from here get much faster. They like the pacing is much faster, and you don't get to breathe in it. You don't get to live and understand the moments that this character is going through and the change that they are going through. It's very fast.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because that was one of my biggest takeaways when watching the film for the first time in a while. Was I can't believe how much time they allow for you to sit in things, for the characters to do character things, and for plot to be a secondary level of importance in relation to the characters. I was talking at work about to one of my coworkers who's also really into Marvel about comparing Iron Man 1 to the origin films of some of the most recent Marvel movies, specifically Shang-Chi. And there was another one that was an origin that I've now forgotten.
There's even stuff in the middle though, like Doctor Strange is pretty breakneck. It's probably one of the next best after Iron Man, but it's still really, really fast.
Yeah. And there is so much plot in all of those newer films. It's only events happening and characters reacting to events happening or causing events to happen. There are so few moments where you get, a montage of Tony building the suit and trying to figure it out, of, him.
Well, they spend like 2 minutes of them building something and you don't know what it is. And it turns out it's the mini arc reactor.
Yeah.
And like, we're as misled as the captors in that moment.
Yeah, and you get, a scene in Iron Man 2 where he's eating a donut and he's complaining about his illness and he's going off, right? Like there are so many moments in a lot of the earlier films that are those quiet moments for characters to bounce off of each other. Especially the conversations with Tony and Pepper. It's why that they're probably the most believable romance in the entire series.
Yeah. Maybe
Ant-Man and the Wasp. I think that they get some good stuff a bit later, but like, I think that they, like, Pepper and Tony really, really feel like a couple that has fallen in love over those years, because they get those moments of, Pepper replacing the arc reactor. Sure, that's a plot moment. That is also a character moment. But even stuff around Pepper making cracks about like the Andy Warhol that Tony's buying, or, like the stuff around Pepper like taking over Stark Industries in the second film. A lot of that stuff isn't plot relevant. It's just character stuff.
Yeah.
Even Iron Man 3, you get a bit of that. Like you get those moments where like it's, dealing with the PTSD and stuff, and that movie's a bit faster, but you still get those good moments where the characters are doing character things with each other.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And that moment you spoke about of Pepper doing the reactor replacement with it, I was watching that scene and I was like, I think this scene is actually pretty masterful, because not only is it doing a lot of plot heavy lifting, well, it's doing a lot of plot establishment, right? Because like that's how there's the second arc reactor backup, which is crucial for the end of the movie, and it also sets up the moment where she gives him the thing, which again is critical for the end of the movie, but it's also exactly as you said, it's another character moment, and it's nice, it's touching, it's simple, but they needed to make a whole prop for that. They needed to think that far ahead and put that together, and it works really well.
So would you believe that when they started filming, neither of those elements were attached to the plot of the film?
I would believe it.
No, but the Tony Stark has a heart, and the second arc reactor that he needs to use later
for backup. Yeah.
They were filming and they didn't have that.
Oh, okay.
Like, they had the scene of them of Tony and Pepper replacing,
but it wasn't as.
It was just important. A character moment. They managed to.
There's got to be a lesson to be learned there, because I was watching it, and it's the thing that makes that scene special. As I'm watching it, is like it is setting all that stuff up without being heavy-handed about it. It's not, especially if it's as you're saying, and they're filming it not knowing we're actually looking at Chekhov's gun in this part of the film. Like, I think that's really good. Like to not be so self-aware of like, oh, the character picked up the wrong phone off the table, so now and we know that he picked up the wrong one because we got a shot of the table this far away from the, like,
and that's,
let's just chill out.
And that's what's so good about those scenes is that they weren't originally designed to establish those plot moments. And because they were woven in out of necessity, because they needed to really tighten up the final act of this film, because they needed to do that, then they were able to do it in a way that felt natural. They could weave in stuff. We're about to get to another really heavily changed plot point a little bit later, but it's a similar thing where they've got these things and it works and it's really good, and then they're stuck at some point in the story and they're like, okay, what's behind us that we can pull from? What have we done that will work for what we're doing right now, and what do we need to change to make it work properly? They do that repeatedly in this film. That being said, the concept of the third act problem is a thing that we are going to hear in almost every episode going forward.
Right. Okay.
That for some ungodly reason, at no point can any fucking Marvel film pull it together properly. But for now, we'll get there. The Ten Rings, as well, themselves, are a fascinating adaptation in the story. It was very deliberate for the terrorist organization to be as multilingual as they are in the film. According to Favreau, the reason there are so many languages in the Ten Rings group is because they wanted the Mandarin's villain to be a few movies down the line and wanted to keep the Ten Rings as a multinational group.
Interesting.
I suppose this would give them the opportunity.
Pretty sensible.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it would also give them the opportunity to change the ethnicity of the Mandarin, so they don't have to go through the heavily racist, mystic Asian stereotype. Although it doesn't really end up going anywhere, as the Mandarin in Iron Man 3 is a completely different character, and the real Mandarin in Shang-Chi is Chinese anyway. They step away from the stereotypical Asian mysticism by making it an actual, Asian American story with rooted in specifically Chinese culture, but it's so much better than what we could have had, right?
Yeah. It's kind of like a big step around in the circle kind of thing.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
In the Robinson and Co book, there's a story told about the design of the designer of the logo of the Ten Rings, which I think is really fascinating. I've edited it slightly for clarity, but I quote: "When designer Diane Chadwick created the logo for the Ten Rings, Iron Man production designer J. Michael Reaver asked her to put extra care into its creation, noting that, quote, this character, meaning the Mandarin, could come back, end quote, and claims to be a descendant of Genghis Khan. Chadwick and Reaver sought to design an image that would hint at this lineage. Chadwick designed the overlapping rings, the swords, and the ornate border, but had to track down translators and calligraphers who could render the characters within the rings in a Mongolian script. Chadwick says they were actually in Mongolia. There aren't that many people who can do this calligraphy anymore.
Yeah, right.
The words in the final logo were the names of the real Mongol and Turkic tribes and clans. I think it's cool.
Huh. Yeah, that's nice. Attention to detail and forethought, that's cool.
Yeah. And on top of that, in the screen, one of the lieutenants on the Ten Rings, Abu Bakr, is played by Egyptian theater actor Saeed Badreya. According to Favreau, his wife's friend recommended him because she was friends with Badra's wife. When they met, Favreau liked him so much that he split Raz's character in two, giving him a supporting role in the film, which is pretty great because that guy's so good. Right. That guy is so good.
This is the guy who always nods to Jensen to translate.
The smiley guy, the one that's kind of you translate now. Yeah. That's
so fun too, because it does great. Lead to the fun moment of we thought he was the boss. Oh, he's not even the boss. Yeah.
The scene, which I didn't realize what they were saying in this scene because they always mumble it. And when I watched it with subtitles the other day, I finally got when he brings Tony outside for the first time and he's pointing at all the missiles that they've got. And then Jensen's translated, you know the word I'm talking about, where he goes build us the missile and we will set you free. And Tony shakes his hand and he goes,
he shakes his hand and he says, no, we won't.
Yeah, no, you won't.
And Jensen says, no, we won't. Yeah. And the guy's just smiling back at him, beaming at him. Yeah.
I had no idea what they were saying. I thought they were saying something in whichever language he's speaking because they mumble it. And so I thought it was Noewam or something, which means I agree or something.
It was so funny. I had the exact same moment watching it this time too, of like, oh, that's what they say.
Oh, that's right. I wasn't reading it with the subtitles. I was reading it in the script. I was like, oh, yeah. Similarly, in an interview with comicbookmovie.com, Clark Gregg reveals that one of the reasons he was cast is because he was neighbors with Jon Favreau.
This is the person who plays Agent Coulson.
Yes. Quote.
Because he was neighbors with Favreau. That's interesting.
Yeah, he lived next door. Quote.
It's so funny though, because like he's so frequently typecast for this role.
Yes.
Like I could easily see him auditioning for it and getting it because he's just always this role.
He's just that guy.
Yeah.
But he's funny in this. Like he's kind, you know?
Yeah.
Quote, I knew my neighbor, Jon Favreau, was putting together an amazing cast for Iron Man, which was one of my favorite comics. And then I got a call. There's this little tiny part. Do you want it? Oh, sorry. Do you want to be in it? And I was like, yes, in all capitals.
Yeah.
I haven't got a quote for this, but like I've heard this enough from people who've worked on the film that he originally had a really small role. I think he only had 1 or 2 scenes. And he had such good chemistry with Downey and Paltrow that they extended his scene out, gave him a name. Once you got a name, you're in it, mate. Like you're there.
Yeah.
Everything that Clark Gregg was able to do next, all of the feature films, being the one to avenge in the Avengers, getting 6 or 7 seasons of a television show, that's all up to him. As I mentioned earlier, the scene at the end where Coulson gives Tony the alibi wasn't scripted to have him in it either. That was added later. Something cool about that scene, though, was that on the newspaper that Tony is reading is a photo of Iron Man. In the original cut of the film, that image was actually the first leaked image of the suit that someone had taken where they snuck onto the backlot.
That's funny.
Published online, Favreau thought it would be a neat Easter egg to include in the film. However, the photographer who took the picture actually ended up suing Marvel Studios and Paramount for using his image without license, so it ended up being digitally altered in the home release.
Oh, man. What a bummer.
It looks like at some point the original might have now been put back on the Disney Plus version. The version of my home release, I think, kind of looks like the one that's the original. It's whatever they replaced it with, it looks relatively close. I think there's a little bit more to the story where there was something around originally when the picture got leaked, the company was sent to DMCA by Marvel, and then the website was brought down and people outcried, and then the website was brought back up, and as a make good, they're invited to set, and then on the set is when they took like another photo or something. Like I don't know, there's a whole thing, but it was there's a weird relationship.
Yep.
As Iron Man reached the end of filming, the crew headed to the final destination of production, Las Vegas, Nevada, while shooting the scene of Tony Stark playing craps. Favreau revealed that just around the corner of the scene was none other than longtime collaborator and close personal friend of Jon Favreau's, Vince Vaughn. They are very
Vaughn.
Yeah, Vince Vaughn and Favreau are really close. They're like best friends, and so he was just on set because I think he lives in Vegas. Once the film entered post-production, it was time to put it together. Favreau brought on Dan Lebenthal to edit the film, someone he's worked with a fair bit. Lebenthal had previously worked on Elf and Zathura, both with Favreau, and would then go on to work with him again on Cowboys and Aliens, which was directed by Favreau, and also Couples Retreat, which was directed by Peter Billingsley. So they've all got their kind of little crew of mates that they all work together.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, right? Because when we were talking about in episode 0 before about Feige's connections to everyone, I did see in that moment that Whedon was being name dropped around that same time as being part of working around the X-Men crew and stuff like that. It's like, oh yeah, it's a lot of stuff in a lot of industries is a lot of it's who you end up getting to know and being close with. I mean, David Hayter as well, working on the first 3 X-Men films and also writing one of the treatments for a previous version of the Iron Man script. It's all like, are you good at this type of film? Yes. All right, come on board. We need you. Yep. I watched a couple of interviews with Dan Lebenthal, and he had some really fascinating stories to tell about his time working on Iron Man. And again, I think these stories are ones that are definitely going to be hearing more and more as we get through the rest of the films. In an interview with HD Film Tools, and I've edited this for clarity too, Lebenthal shares that he was brought on very early into the film for editing. Quote, I started part-time in October of 2006, and the shoot wasn't until March of 2007. What the hell?
Then the
So
interviewer,
what was it? Was he editing the previs?
the interviewer says, so you were cutting together animatics and storyboards, asked the interviewer. Exactly. We were developing it. They would try things and I'd say, well, if we're going to do this, you should do this. It was a very odd position though, I will say, because traditionally as an editor, we're kind of like the catcher. What we do is the directors have all their intentions and we take it and we deal in what's real and what they've actually done and what we can make of it. So it's a bit of a change. It's a bit of a changing role in being asked to help conceive things. He goes on to mention that in the edit, he's been given sequences that aren't going to make it to the final edit and been given new ones, which is a struggle to piece together. Quote, what we find is that we're not really locking sequences and we're just putting them in motion. And then there was an awful lot of shots that only went a quarter of the way through the effects process. They were the stop the presses, we're doing something different shots. In my world, that's the cart leading the horse. And I want to tell the story and then have the effects be done to service it. So this is the beginning. It starts with Iron Man 1.
Yeah, that is interesting. That said, I do think it is cool to involve the editor in the process earlier rather than just have them be the catch-all.
Especially if you know who your editor is going to be, right? But again, this is the problem is that it's Favreau, the head of the film, bringing in a guy he knows and trusts. Marvel, if they've just got in-house editors, then it's like, what are we doing here?
And it also, if it's before writers and directors and producers and actors have been attached to projects, then all they're doing is making animations for concepts, for ideas that someone said, oh, hey, wouldn't this be cool? And that's just pie in the sky. And
I wasn't going to touch on this in this episode, but I do want to clarify that they do have writers inside of Marvel Studios, which are in-house writers. So they actually got a team. I forget the name of the program. It's something that we're going to cover at some point, but there's a program that Marvel have got where what they do is they hire writers out of college and they give them comic books and they say, read until you find one you want to write a screenplay for. And that's their job, which in my mind is an incredible gig. Like you're getting paid no matter what. And your film might become
paid research.
Yeah. And it's like, it's kind of like a spec script job where it's like people do that freelance all the time where all they do is they write speculative scripts and then they try and option them to studios and studios and pick them up for dirt cheap. And then they maybe get brought onto the film. They maybe not get brought onto the film. Studio might buy them saying, I think I want this, but I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. So I'm just going to buy it now and hold it for a handful of years. If it gets made into a film later, you get a bigger payout later, but for now you get an upfront fee, right? That's a really common thing in Hollywood. This is like that, but in-house. And so a lot of the films that come out once Marvel Studios starts to get a little bit bigger comes from their small team of writers. And those writers do attach themselves to the films going forward and then stay on as script doctors so that when any of the issues in films come around, then they've got, a small fleet of writers. They could just send one or two to any production.
Go fix the problem.
Yeah. And then come back and keep working on the stuff that you were working on prior. But then it means that no one's working on the thing that they want to work on because they believe in it, right? It is like they're approaching directors. It's imagine the layering, but they're
just hands in the crew and they just get sent out to do a job and then to come back and keep doing the job.
It's the exact same thing as Avi Arad was doing, just entirely inside the room. It's we're going to bring everything together ourselves and then try and put it all together. From Robinson & Co.'s book. Favreau finished principal photography in less than 4 months. The shoot wrapped and raw footage was sent to various post-production companies for digital enhancement. While the filmmakers waited for those shots to come back, Dan Leventhal cut a rough three-hour version of the film. This is the assembly cut. That is when Favreau and Marvel Studios made an unpleasant discovery. The ending didn't work at all. In an interview with HD Film Tools, this is what Leventhal had to say. I've edited this again for clarity. John comes in and hopefully he can keep his lunch down because that's every director I've ever met. And that's the hardest moment of the film because of the objective of the assembly cut is to, tell them, here's what we've got to work with. This is everything. Now, what are you going to do with it? He's really great. He's like actually a really funny kind of jovial interviewer when he's talking about working on really big budget films. And he's like, this is what I got. What do you want? It's really good.
Yeah.
This is everything. Now, what are you going to do with it? And so usually I already have a whole game plan in my head that's been dying to go down. But out of respect for a director, I won't start cutting his material until I've at least shown it to him. I always keep a bulletin board with pictures of every scene I have on the bottom. I have something I call death row. And those are the scenes that have been taken out. And it was the biggest death row I have ever seen on a film.
Oh, no.
By this point in the production, the sets had begun to be torn down, and it was getting close to the end of 2007. Iron Man's release date was 2008. Reign of the MCU writes, reassembling actors and production staff would be complicated and expensive, but on the other hand, there was just enough time to pull something together, and nobody liked the current ending. Favreau mentions this in the commentary too, that while trying to fix the ending, he reached out to both J.J. Abrams and Shane Black for help. They'd be on the phone to each other and Robert Downey Jr. trying to come up with a satisfying ending. Abrams would actually then hire Farron Tahir, who plays Raza in the film, in his 2009 Star Trek reboot. And he's really good in that as well. And Shane Black, good friend of Robert Downey Jr., who worked together on Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, would later go on to direct Iron Man 3 and write Iron Man 3. So, yeah.
So
Abrams
when we're talking about
Shane Black are on the phone to Favreau and Downey trying to figure out what the ending to this movie is. Should be.
Just workshop it.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, the ending doesn't work, from when till when do you know? Like, which point are they talking about? Like, which part particular isn't working?
Yeah, so a lot of the ending is actually in the deleted scenes, and there's a lot of it in the script as well. What the ending is a much more melodramatic, extended out version of the final act. There are two specific scenes that they speak about, which one I'm going to get to in a minute. But the scenes in the final fight, the fight scene is much longer. Rhodey is like involved in the fight in he's like driving a vehicle into Ironmonger a bunch. The dialogue against Pepper and Tony is much longer, and there's a lot more like melodrama around Obadiah referring to Tony as son, and then he's falling and Tony's like, let me save you. And then Obadiah tries to pull him down into the arc reactor. And then he misses, and then he says like a final goodbye to Tony in like a sort of like in a mean spirited, but kind of nice, but still like hurtful way of like, it doesn't work. It really, really doesn't work. Like they're on the Blu-ray and when you're watching me, like this isn't good. And it sort of shows why his death is semi-abrupt in the film.
Yeah, well, I suppose not just his death, but also his turn, like his proper full turn to like just super villain who will kill people and like randomly, and I think a lot of people have trouble with him in that final act. Like,
and it doesn't matter as much because he's so captivating on screen. But something that I did notice is that in the script for the final act, a lot of the lines that don't get used in that final act because the scenes were cut, actually make it into some of the earlier scenes. So in the scene where he rips the arc out of Tony, in another scene, I think with Raza, maybe a scene with Pepper, a lot of the really evil lines in those scenes are actually originally all from the final act, and then they brought them into the earlier scenes because they're really good lines. And so they re-chopped some of it because they knew they weren't going to do as much of the final act as they were planning, and then even later, even less. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. After 5 frantic months, sorry, this is the I believe this is the interview actually with all of the writers. After 5 frantic months of production rewrites, all 4 of the credited screenwriters had been released from their Iron Man duties. Oh no, sorry, this would be actually the Robinson's book. Art Markham and Matt Holloway, the original writing team, had also taken a break during the middle of the shoot because they had to write a TV pilot they had previously sold. But now, Marvel Studios rehired Markham and Holloway, explained the problem, and screened the latest cut of the movie for them. Almost immediately...
And they said, no.
Almost immediately, the writers saw a way out, with a callback ending that played off an earlier scene in the movie. Holloway remembered how they presented it to Feige. What if Iron Man's getting the shit kicked out of him, and he remembers that Obadiah didn't build his suit, he stole it, and he doesn't know its defects. At a certain altitude, it ices up. Feige loved the idea, but at this early point in his career, didn't believe he was the final word, so he told the duo, pitch it to John.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's really funny. The original ending is quite long. There's a lot of melodrama between Tony and Stain, and Tony attempts blah, 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 blah. Most of this is cut. Another major cut was a very long sequence that was fully filmed, set in Dubai, and placed just before Tony's return to Gulmira and his confrontation with the US Air Force jets. Tony Stark abruptly wants to head to Dubai to have a massive party. This is meant to be a cover so he can have a more forward position for his operations in the Middle East, destroying his previous weapons. The scene is huge and really, really needless. It's not very engaging.
Expensive, I'll bet.
There's not a whole lot happening. It's just kind of a mansion with a party. It's not very engaging. It's more Tony party antics, but we know it's fake this time. Also, Ghostface Killer, the rapper, makes a cameo because one of his rap names is Iron Man. And Favreau felt so bad about cutting him that he gave him a cameo on the TV in the jet as a make good. But the Dubai sequence does not work, and the film is reworked entirely to remove it. However, one of the problems this caused was now we don't have any scenes of Tony getting in and out of the suit. He was doing that in those scenes, but they suddenly don't have them anymore because they had to axe the entire Dubai section. One of the now highlights of the film. And to make matters worse, Robert Downey Jr. had moved on to his next film. Here's concept artist Phil Saunders on the really awesome suit-up sequence in the middle of the film. Quote.
So are we talking about the original test flight, like the silver test flights as well?
No, we're talking about when he is...
We're talking about the first red and gold suit up.
Yeah.
And suit down, I guess.
Yeah, because when he goes back to Gulmira, he's got the red and yellow suit at this point. Yeah. No, sorry, the test sequences are in there. But there's no Iron Man suit up sequence. The big mandate here was to try and do as much as possible without actually having to have the actor involved. A lot of the sequence was based on creating shots that hit his face so we could use a stunt double or working in a lot of detailed insert shots to focus on smaller events. Our goal was to have this be a fast-paced and well-choreographed shot, give it a sense of overlapping motion and with one part of the robotic system retracting, another coming in. No dead space. Everything happening just in time. Everything had to have this immaculate sense of precision. When originally pitching the movie to Marvel, according to the director's commentary, Favreau had to cut out all of the suit-up sequences to get the film greenlit at a reduced budget. Not long after, a little film directed by Michael Bay called Transformers had released.
Whoa.
Favreau went straight back to Marvel and said, "Are you crazy? People just spent so much money to see the trucks turn into suits." They then had to get the budget for ILM to make the suit-up sequences.
That's a really strong call. If they didn't have suit-ups in this,
could you imagine?
Would be really bare. Well, we were talking about how much this film is character-driven and dialogue-focused, which helps give the movie a lot of its heart. But the stuff that... Part of why that works is because the sparing amounts of action and like tech and all of the like Iron Man stuff that only really happens in the second half of the movie, it's all really good. It is used sparingly, but it is high quality and it goes really far with just how they use it. They use just enough at just the right moments. Like I remember when I watched it when I was 13, I was like, I really like this movie. I wish there was a bit more action.
Right. Sure.
But it didn't stop me from liking the movie. It did just feel a bit sparse. And if the thought of this movie without those suit up sequences, like there's a reason why on YouTube it says all Iron Man suit up sequences. Like they do it from here until the end for all of the Iron Man suits. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And it's one of the bummers about the last appearances of Tony is that his suit up sequences are so boring. Like nanotech is so boring compared to like
machinery.
Yeah. And like even like one of the coolest ones I think honestly is the one in Civil War when he's in the helicopter and he puts his finger in the thing and the whole suit climbs around him. Like that's cool.
The one in Iron Man 3 as well is really...
Oh, they're
really
so
great.
good in Iron Man 3.
Yeah.
Just on what you said, I didn't really find a good way to weave this in, but a lot of the sound effects in this movie come from Skywalker Sound. Specifically Ben Burke, who worked on the original Star Wars films and is responsible for doing the sounds of R2-D2 and Wall-E as well. So like that's one of the reasons why the sounds of the suit feel right in this film. So back to the script, the writers had the brilliant plan to call back the final act to Tony's first flight sequence. Robinson and co. write, Favreau, desperately trying to bring in Iron Man under budget, was hesitant because the sequence would cost $6 million. But a labor dispute forced him into a decision. The Writers Guild of America had been negotiating a new contract with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. With a writer's strike looming, Favreau realized he wasn't going to be offered a better option anytime soon. Suddenly, it was, guys, you know that sequence you pitched us? We need you to write it, Holloway said. We wrote it up against the deadline to the strike.
You've got 48 hours.
Holloway and Markham turned in their script of the new finale just before midnight on November 4th, 2007. On November 5th, the writer's strike began and would last more than 3 months.
This is 6 months before the launch of the movie.
I think one of the things why that sequence can work so well is there's no actors in it.
Yeah.
That's one of the ways.
All CG.
It's all CG. That's one of, I think, the undersung creative decisions that those writers were doing when they need to quickly doctor a script, is that they also need to come up with a practical budgetary solution to something when Downey's gone on to his next project. Bridges might not be available. Like, you know, Paltrow's
they did a
busy.
tiny bit of like camera, like in the helmet shots with Downey, didn't they, for that one? Where he's telling Jarvis, like, stop telling me to keep climbing.
Maybe. But also that might be recut from the first flight.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
I want to say that Bridges' inside helmet shot in that sequence is a little bit weird, that maybe it was also used from another thing. I don't actually know, but I want to say it feels a little bit weird based off like my vibe.
I don't know if does he have a helmet shot in the climb up? Because I know he's got one on the roof when he's looking around for Tony.
No, he's got one in the climb up because he's looking confused as like a
the icing problem.
Yeah. He doesn't say that when we see his mouth.
No.
But I think we get a shot of him looking around because
or like as the lights flicker off or something.
Yeah, and then because later on when he's confused and when he's blind, he takes the helmet off really quick.
Yeah.
So you're right about also the Stain stealing ideas becoming a narrative point, but it wasn't there until after they had finished filming.
Wow. Right. Okay. Which is why they didn't really make a big deal of it in any of the dialogue, or it's more thematic. It's more
yeah. It's this isn't your suit. You didn't make this. You don't know how it works.
Yeah.
Now, it wouldn't be a Marvel movie if we didn't also talk about the post-credit scene featuring Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. To get the whole picture of this, we need to go back a little bit before Marvel Studios. Not all this is directly related to Iron Man, but the people in the story I'm about to talk about are important to Marvel as a whole, and it will come up a handful of times in the future, some of which we spoke about briefly in episode 0. So, after Marvel broke up with the Comic Code Authority, which was an attempt by the dominant comic publishers to avoid having government regulations and ratings, Marvel editor-in-chief Joe Quesada and vice president of Marvel Bill Jemas started up a new line of comics titled Marvel Max. The Reign of the MCU book describes Marvel Max as a, quote, new edgier line in which characters like the Punisher could curse and blow heads off. After firing many of Marvel's longtime writers, they were looking for brand new talent at Marvel. Reign of Marvel Studios writes a lot of the next section much better than I can, so a lot of this is going to be a direct quote from the book. But this is what Robinson and Co. say. Including the team of English artist Brian Hitch and Scottish writer Mark Miller, Hitch remembers the phone call he got from Quesada. Quote, look, the lunatics are running the asylum over here. Why don't you just come over and have some fun? Which is kind of like macho and a bit gross, but...
it's pretty disparaging.
However, it worked. Miller and Hitch were given the task of reinventing the Avengers. They, and this is still Robinson and Co. They approached the job with gusto, going so far as to rename the team the Ultimates. Have you heard of the Ultimates at all, Carrie?
No, I've heard of like the ultimate run of Marvel, like
the Ultimate
that's
Universe.
A whole different. Yeah.
So this is in that.
Okay.
In the Ultimates, Captain America was still a thawed super soldier from World War II, but Thor became an environmental activist who was mentally unbalanced enough to believe that he was the god of thunder, while the Hulk, for some reason, held a grudge against Freddie Prinze Jr.
Freddie Prinze Jr.
For some reason. There were no MCU movies on the horizon when they launched The Ultimates in 2002, though the creators discussed how one might render the team in a modern movie as a way of coming at the property from a fresh angle. The Ultimates is like really bad. Like the Ultimates universe as a concept, creatively was awful. It was meant to be a full reboot of Marvel because one of the major differences between Marvel and DC at the time is that Marvel had a single ongoing canon, kind of, since the original Marvel comics. 616 is meant to be a single linear storyline that actually did end, I think, in 2016. But 616 is meant to be a single thing. And so they launched the Ultimates as a jumping in point, as well as what if we redid everything? What if nothing was sacred? What if we questioned everything and rewrote everything to see what it could be, right? For a while, the Ultimates were going to be what the Avengers were based off when they were going to, when the film was in production. Like it's a lot of the looks in the Avengers film, specifically Thor's with his long hair, no helmet, big axe. His outfit is very Ultimates themed. But by the time the Avengers came out, the appetite for the Ultimates had disappeared so far because they're just not good comics.
Right.
There is like a single good line of comics in the Ultimate Universe, and that's Ultimate Spider-Man. And that's only because it was the single most fresh and classic style of Spider-Man comics that I've read in a very, very long time. And
right, okay. So that was more a credit to just the writing of that series in particular.
Exactly. And they also introduced Miles Morales in that storyline.
That's what I thought was the Ultimate stuff.
Yeah. So at some point in 2016, they did another Secret Wars event. This one written by an actually really prolific and one of my favorite writers of all time. And it rules and is great and is not nearly as crappy as the Secret Wars we were speaking about prior. But the whole point of the Secret Wars event was to actually combine the Ultimates universe and the 616 universe into a single canon so that they weren't stuck, because they kept on trying to do both stories either side, and it was a pick and choose which stories survive and which don't in a way that it worked. Continuing on from the Robinson's book, the 9/11 attacks altered the tenor of the entire Ultimate line, sending it in a darker direction. Quote, "It was super terrorism, not super villainy," Hitch said, and that changed the tone completely. It also made the figure of Nick Fury more important. He was the commander of S.H.I.E.L.D., Marvel's leading anti-terrorism agency. In a different title, Ultimate Fantastic Four, Miller had established that the ultimate Nick Fury was black. He explained, "I wanted an African-American Nick Fury to be the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. because the closest thing to the real world to this job was held by Cole Powell at the time," which is insane to talk about one of Bush's cabinet members in a post-World War II world as a hero.
The closest to Nick Fury.
I know. I also thought Nick Fury sounded like one of those great 70s blaxploitation names, so the whole thing coalesced for me into a very specific character, an update of the cool American super spy. I think that is completely true. Nick Fury, that is a Shaft level blaxploitation name. Jackson was a lifelong comics fan, Samuel L. Jackson. Growing up in Chattanooga, Tennessee in the 50s, he was such a voracious reader of comics that his grandmother, who largely raised him, established a rule that for every 5 comics he consumed, he had to read something more substantial.
That's a good deal.
Yeah. As he regularly shopped at the Los Angeles comic book store in Golden Apple, it was no surprise that Jackson soon spotted his own face in the page of the Ultimates. So,
right. I think I have heard this before.
Yeah. So who was it? Was it Mark Miller? Miller and the artist that Miller worked with, who shows up at some point, Hitch, based Nick Fury off Samuel L. Jackson in a way that was without permission.
Right. Sort of like Elliot Page before when The Last of Us came out. It was like, hang on.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Flattered but confused, he called his agents. Sam's people got in touch with Marvel and they said, "Should we be suing you over this?" said Hitch. Marvel avoided a lawsuit by saying that if Nick Fury was ever in a movie, Jackson could play the role. Jackson accepted, and his wife, Latanya Richardson Jackson, even bought an original page of Hitch's art as a birthday present for Sam.
That's nice.
I didn't include it here, but years ago, in the 1980s or early 90s, when the direct-to-TV adaptation of Nick Fury was made, starring David Hasselhoff.
Oh, right, yeah.
he was promised the same deal.
Oh, no way.
Not
if there's ever a movie, you'll be Nick Fury.
Yeah. It was never like a legally binding thing. There was no contracts or whatever. But he wasn't.
What was that? 15 years after his thing?
It might have been closer to 20 or 25. He was pretty fit. It was like it was just coming out of the Baywatch era.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, look, it's he doesn't hold a grudge over it. He's joked about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny.
Oh man.
After the film had wrapped, the set of Tony's mansion had not yet been demolished. So as secretive as they possibly could, they brought in Samuel L. Jackson to make good on their promise. Comic writer Brian Michael Bendis was also on set, as he had written a few variations of the post-credit stinger.
Right.
Also, just on the house, really quick, people were apparently looking for the real Tony Stark mansion so much, and let me specifically mention it's not real, that Marvel put the house, or Favreau, put the house on a real estate site, and when you clicked on it, it would take you to Iron Man's website. According to Robinson and Co., some of the versions of the post-credit scene had extra dialogue from Stark. For example, what are we avenging? And one other unused take even referenced two other successful franchises based on Marvel properties, plus the Hulk film was about to start shooting. Jackson, as Fury, complained, as if gamma accidents and radioactive bug bites and assorted mutants weren't enough, I have to deal with a spoiled brat who doesn't play well with others and just wants to keep all his toys to himself. It's a crap.
Wow, it's a wonder why they didn't use that line.
It's such a crap
God.
line. Also, they don't own the rights to half of the things they just mentioned in that fucking...
Exactly.
Yeah. Like, not only is that... It's a crap line.
Yeah.
Secrecy was, however, for nothing. As the day after the scene was shot, someone managed to snap a shot of Jackson in costume walking onto the set. The internet went nuts with rumors that Nick Fury was going to appear in the new Iron Man film. Then, when screeners went out for reviews to outlets, Nick Fury was absent from the film. Favreau recalls that in order to keep the surprise for fans, the scene was removed for reviewers so they would correctly, I'd like to point out, correctly confirm that he wasn't in the film.
Correct. That's not correct. That's incorrect.
Well, no, correctly is true. And I wrote correctly because on their version of the fucking film, he's not in it.
Oh, right. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. They were correct in saying he's not in the film that I saw, you know?
That's like the next level of how in the Infinity War trailers, like we see shots that just never happen, and it was all just to like throw people off. Like that's next level. It's cool they were thinking about it that much and trying that hard from the start.
I hate it.
No, you don't like it?
Once the film made its way to theaters, the scene was added back in. I think this is weird and gross. Who fucking cares?
So gaslighting reviewers.
Yeah, like this is the problem with all of these big studios all the time, is that all they do is lie about stuff and then they blame people who are trying to just do a job about telling people what they say. And then it turns into vitriol for like all these dumb reviewers didn't know that Sam Jackson was in the film. Didn't they even stay for the credits? It's like,
okay, yeah, no, that's fair.
And it's not like this didn't explicitly happen, but this is exactly how that happens every single time, right? Like this is the insane stuff that happens in games, movies, television, all the time. It is disingenuous. A cameo is not a spoiler. Like that's not a spoiler. A spoiler is something that is affecting your enjoyment of the film. If someone tells you Nick Fury at the end of at the end of the credits, you don't watch Iron Man going, well, I didn't enjoy that nearly as much.
Yeah, for a cameo, that's a good point. I think when you compare it to something like the different people arriving and appearing in No Way Home, I do think a large part of the value of those scenes is comprised of it being a surprise, like not knowing that that's going to happen. Now,
yeah, but they got to like just pick different scenes. And it's like, if they know they're going to hide it, then they need to focus on the scenes ahead of time that they know they're going to show. And they don't do that because they don't know until an hour before the film's in the theaters which scenes they want in their fucking movies. It's like, the problem isn't the fact that they're hiding stuff. The problem is that they've gotten so bad at making a movie that they don't know what they can and can't show, because so many of the times these scenes are changing left and right. You know, sometimes they're changing films in between theaters and Disney Plus because they are still working on it after the fact.
Yeah.
Like at what point?
We'll talk about like movies that get patched these days. Yeah.
They patched WandaVision. It's like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
The Nick Fury cameo was also originally going to be right after the 3D credits of the film, not after the long just
right. Interesting.
Credits.
I did think that was an interesting take for the first movie to bury it all the way at the end.
Favreau showed director Edgar Wright the film, and he was the one that suggested putting the stinger at the very end. Marvel apparently weren't happy with it because they thought people might miss it. But Edgar Wright was like, I think Favreau quotes him as saying like, yeah, like allow people to come back and buy a ticket again to go see it or whatever.
Totally.
It's also much better than the original scripted post-credit scene, which is Tony and Rhodey looking at the War Machine design and remarking, good, I want a Gatling gun on the right shoulder. Tony, and a rocket launcher on the left? Where are you going to store all that ammo? Rhodey, whose suit is it anyway? And do it in silver and black, would you? It's like campy. It's like corny.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yep.
In the interview with Lebenthal, he recalls a phone call he received on the day Iron Man was released. Quote, I get a call on my cell phone and I'm driving and I'm like, who is this? And it's the freaking head of the studio. And I was like, hi. And he was like, I just want to tell you that this is the best film I've ever been associated with. And I was like, I guess it's all downhill from here. That's such a funny thing to tell.
Very funny response.
It's such a funny response to say to Feige. One of the
high praise though. That's cool.
Totally. One of the unsung heroes of the film is also Matthew Lebatique, the cinematographer. Lebenthal had this to say: I'll give my cinematographer Matty a lot of credit because he didn't necessarily know what was going to come out of Downey's mouth, but he knew how to cover with multiple cameras better than any cinematographer I've ever worked with. I was never in a corner.
He always had material.
I could always go to whenever I needed, and thus Downey could get his performance to just shine. Matty, as a result, could shoot two cameras, which hadn't really been done. Sorry, Matty, as a rule, could shoot two cameras, which I hadn't really seen, because usually if you shoot two cameras, one of them is comprised not by being lit as well, but the way he did it, I couldn't tell camera A from camera B. It was just wonderful.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Like an editor's dream.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Also, I do want to shout out, there are just some genuinely great shots in this movie.
Yeah.
Like when Obadiah is extracting the arc reactor.
And the light.
And Tony's paralyzed. Oh, yeah, the light comes out of and the smoke effect, too. Like, it's a great prop.
Yeah.
And I think they do the whole, like, fake chest thing again because so it can come out of his chest.
Yeah.
But also, it's such an intense tilted angle of the camera, and they slowly bring it back down to horizontal as Obadiah sits down beside Tony, and it does so well with the music and the dread of the scene. You don't really see that many shots in the MCU like that.
No,
but it doesn't stick out either. Like, it's not like a Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness Sam Raimi like just wacky shot. It's just really effectively used.
Yeah. It like the film is framed really well. A lot, like, again, like the cave sequence at the beginning, like they mentioned at some point that the way they were shooting the Mark I armor was meant to, they were shooting it like a horror like monster. So they were like obscuring things, and people are running away, and people are getting out of the way, and you know, like, you follow a lot of the actual goons in the cave and following them as opposed to the perspective of Iron Man. It looks like that he's sort of like hunting them. There's a lot of great stuff like that. Libertique had this to say to Collider working on Iron Man, quote, I just remember having that indie spirit. John, I think the biggest film he had done up until that point was The Thura, and then before that he did Elf, and he has that, I don't know, just indie optimism in a way. And that was the case on Iron Man. It was like it was kind of a maiden voyage. Avi Arad was still around. He was bringing the history of Marvel there, and Kevin Feige was this brilliant right-hand man. Obviously, the past 10 years of has told us he's a brilliant mind when it comes to trying to structure this universe. But we were all very young for people who are making $100 million movie.
Yeah.
I would also be remiss if I didn't mention the music. The really incredible electric guitar soundtrack that plays through the film is due to the collaboration between Favreau and Ramin Djawadi, who is most famous for being the composer on Game of Thrones, including the main theme. He's done a lot of excellent work. He also worked on Pacific Rim, Blade Trinity, Fallout, Uncharted, and Warhammer. Yeah. Yeah, he's great. About working with Favreau, Djawadi said this in an interview with the AV Club. He always said, I don't know, he's rock and roll, you know? You should have a rock and roll score. That's how we came up with the idea of mixing the electric guitar and going rock with the orchestra. And I thought that was a great idea. I thought it was perfectly suited for the character. It shows how you can mold the score around a superhero or the character.
I also, when I was watching this again, I was thinking they did such a good job of making this score memorable and effective. And even when it isn't memorable, like it's kind of hitting that sort of Danny Elfman level of symphonic and grandiose. But yeah, it really does underpin it with as they were saying, with the electric guitar. Yeah, like there are parts of the themes written in this movie that I can remember far better than nearly any of the other music that comes through the entire rest of the MCU, barring except a few Avengers themes. Like, it's really incredible.
And I think it's a shame only because I think that the films, a lot of the music in the films, from Thor to Captain America themes, the Avengers themes, the Ant-Man theme, the Giacchino Spider-Man theme, and the Iron Man 3 theme as well, I think are actually really good. The problem is they weren't, I think, utilized in the movie as well as they should have been. But the actual music is good, which is a bummer.
Yeah. It's also like, I feel like the music pretty frequently gets discarded. Like for something that could be quite iconic for a character, they could easily wheel it back out and have it be part of the identity of the character is these themes, you know, in the same way, like when you're playing Final Fantasy VII Remake, like those really iconic songs that they have then reorchestrated and made so wonderful and big and grand, they become part of the identity of the characters when you see them for the first time in these locations for the first time. And they don't, and then when they come back again in Rebirth, like it's that much better. You don't really get that in. I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy VII. All right,
so
let me have my moment.
That as your barometer, and not like, I don't know, Star Wars, or you know, with like themes that have lasted 45 years.
Look, this is on minimap.com.au, a video games website. You're going to get me as you get me, all right?
We're as much as a Star Wars website as we are a video games website at this point. From Robinson & Co.'s book, Iron Man premiered in May 2008, and it was an immediate hit. With a 98.6 million domestic opening, it ultimately grossed over 585 million worldwide. Marvel had made one high-stake gamble after another, mortgaging its characters to get the chance to make its own movies, hiring Downey, trusting Favreau to deliver a satisfying movie, even when he seemed to be making everything up as he went along, and more. Those bets paid off so spectacularly that even Ike Perlmutter showed up for the Hollywood premiere. Perlmutter had to be dissuaded from only slashing the potato chips for the catering at the event. He wanted to limit the menu to only potato chips. The press adverse Perlmutter had no interest in walking the red carpet or any interviews and slipped into Grauman's Chinese Theater in disguise, wearing glasses and a fake mustache. So I didn't mention this in episode 0.
What a grouch.
Did you know that there are like 3 images of Ike Perlmutter ever?
I did not know that. For those who didn't watch episode 0, this is the
current head in the story of our film.
Of Marvel.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are no photos of this guy. Like there was
That's
a photo
so
in like the 80s or the 90s, and then we saw nothing of him until someone snapped a photo of him next to Trump in the White House through a bush.
Jesus.
It is like a real, like someone's finally got an updated look at what Ike Perlmutter looks like.
Wow. Okay, interesting.
Following on from the launch of the film, Ryan Coogler, the director of Black Panther in 10 years from this, was at a screening of Iron Man that Feige and Favreau were at. In an interview with each other as a part of Iron Man's 15-year celebration, Favreau and Feige reminisced about that moment. Quote from Feige: "Yeah, we were just in the back. We hit all these different theaters, and the Cinerama Dome is one of them. Many years later, I learned that Ryan Coogler, who would go on to direct Black Panther, was in the audience that night, and he told me a story. This was months and months, if not a year into working with him. He said, yeah, by the way, I want to tell you something. I was at the Cinerama Dome." Oh, he was in college, and he just saw it, and he said he saw the 3 of us walking past him.
Cute. Nice. That's fun.
I think an end to the story is worth hearing from Jon Favreau. It's a bit too long to read the entire ending that I was originally going to put in here, which is his forward from the Iron Man art book. But there are some things in here that is worth reading. So I've cut this down because he speaks directly to the art book a fair bit, which I think we don't particularly need. This is Jon Favreau. Iron Man was a life-changing experience. The best way to describe it would be that we were building the hot rod while we were racing it. It is the case much of the time that these movies never actually lock a script until they're shot and cut. They require an incredible amount of gut instinct and many talented collaborative partners. These types of movies are not made from a script as much as a melange of storyboards, notes on cocktail napkins, dialogue scrawled through on the back of the day slides, and keyframe drawings hung on the set for inspiration. The movie is slowly culled from both written and drawn elements that together form the story. The talented writers that we employed contributed a great deal early on in the process, and thanks to a strong and storied guild, were recognized in the front credits. There are, however, many others who contributed equally to the vision of the film, and it is to those unsung heroes that this book is dedicated. There was a moment in post-production when everything seemed very tenuous and bleak. We hadn't settled into a satisfying cut, and the effects weren't yet landing right. It was an awful period in the process. After years of hard work, you're stuck with the lingering fear that in spite of unflagging dedication and meticulous planning, the whole thing might go pear-shaped. It was around that time that Kevin Feige gave me a copy of The Making of Star Wars. It documented interviews and photos done behind the scenes long before the film was ever a hit, when all seemed to be going very wrong, but it didn't. It went quite well, most would say, when all was said and done. Reading this book gave me one thing most required for the making of a successful movie, and life for that matter: faith. The phenomenon is so common that it is indeed predictable. You plan and scheme, some things work out, many don't. In the end, the movie either works or it doesn't, and you are never even aware of where that tipping point is when you pass it. Both success and failure hit you with equal surprise. It is best, therefore, to concentrate on making the movie. And thank you, Stan Winston, wherever you are. It's quite nice.
It's beautiful. That's lovely. Contemplative, reflective.
And shouting out specific teams as well, like, like the writing team and other teams in there as like like it's as yours as much as it is mine and XYZ.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's good to actually
how collaborative it was.
Yeah. I've got a bunch of random errant notes at the bottom of this. They're mostly just funny little gags and little tidbits that happen on the set. For example, Tom Morello, the guitarist from fucking, what's it called?
Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah. Rage Against the Machine. He's
Guitar Hero 3.
Yes, actually. He is one of the goons in the cave.
Oh.
And also the guitar on the suit up sequence.
Oh, yeah, really? That's great.
Yeah.
Is that just maybe does he know Ramin maybe? And
maybe.
Well, no, that wouldn't get him into the scene in the cave though. Like, what's the deal?
Yeah, that would have been early. He might just know Favreau or Downey or something.
Yeah. That's cool. That's fun.
Yeah. Jensen doing the run towards the 10 Rings goons was apparently meant to be a takeoff of Han Solo running towards the stormtroopers in New Hope.
Oh, you know what? I did find it a bit weird. Mm-hmm. It did seem a little slapstick, but no, that's cool. I think the thing that not undersells it, but like the thing that makes that so weird is like he then runs into the goon squad and then it's like it's all over for him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I do have something to say about Jensen, but like let's get to the end of your thing if you want.
Oh, these are mostly tiny. We didn't talk about Paul Bettany at all.
Yep.
He's really, really quite separate to a lot of the production of the film. There is a story that like I need to still research a little bit, talking about how like he went for this role and the producer hated him, and so he said, "You're never going to work in this town again." And then apparently like an hour later, Favreau said, "Hey, do you want to be this robot in my Iron Man movie?" Like a voice, and he went, "All right."
And then 15 years later.
Yeah.
He said that for like this like GQ retrospective or something.
Yeah,
right?
something like that. Thing. I think he was brought on quite late into the production of the film. I doubt he was honestly even there while they were filming. I think it might have been like a last minute sort of thing. We need a voice.
I remember. Well, I've seen that bit that he does where he talks about his involvement in Iron Man, and if I'm recalling this correctly, I believe he says that the way they were using Jarvis was to patch holes in the story wherever they could.
Yeah, that tracks.
Like they could use him to help make sense of things better.
He I read a thing saying that he also hadn't seen the film for a little while after it came out. Like he just didn't really bother to go watch it. Not for any negative reasons, but just didn't get around to it. In part of this screenplay, they do reference the stuff around Tony's time limit on his arc. They don't use that at all in the film. What a good choice.
And it's so interesting because when you were talking about that earlier, I do love that they still fit it in there, but only as like it's spent some of its energy and hasn't been able to recharge enough yet. And there's such a toll. It's not that he's going to lock up and become like a paperweight in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
But just that right now the demands exceed the supply.
And it's also often more because he's on the old arc reactor as well.
Especially in the ending.
It is plot relevant. Some of the stuff I've got is a Marvel.com interviewer talking to Bridges, and he says, "So you've played a slacker dude, and now you're playing a super guy." And Bridges goes, "It's all the same, man. It's all planned." He seems so cool.
A slacker dude and super guy.
Downey would also often consult on how to live in a prison based on his previous experiences in the cave. Specifically talking about making food. You know, like on pans and stuff when you don't have a whole lot of ingredients. And finally, like I'm not sure if this is just the film familiarity or maybe not quite there for some of the members of the prop house, but a handful of times they actually refer to Obadiah Stane's character as the Crimson Dynamo. So like I don't know if that was maybe a middle change that he was still going to be Crimson Dynamo. Not too sure, but it also just might have been that they were working off the idea of Mandarin and Crimson Dynamo, that then when it became Bridges, they just didn't always clock the new name. I wouldn't read into it too far.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's basically it. Actually, no, so there's one final thing. So I had no idea where to put this little story, and I think it's really funny and really weird. So this is from Jamie Kellman, who is an Iron Man makeup artist. This is a full quote from Robinson's book. Quote, "I remember Jeff Bridges bringing this game with these little plastic pigs called porkers. They're like dice that you would roll them, and in between takes, we'd sit around and play this game on set. It doesn't seem like you could ever do that on a Marvel movie anymore. Play little dice games with the lead actor sitting there rolling plastic pigs around and saying, 'Hey, they're making bacon,' because one of their noses lands in the other one's hind cheeks. But this was the easy fun of those days, and it wasn't a million takes. It seemed like they all become a million takes after that."
Wow. Yeah, that's a funny look back.
Porkers.
Porkers making bacon.
You had a thing.
I think the only thing that I haven't touched on from my rewatch of this that I did want to touch on that I sort of wish they had that I wish was different with the movie.
Mm-hmm.
They make a big enough deal of, Jensen sort of being there to not only keep Stark alive at the start, but he sort of acts as Tony's lens to
like
see how. Yeah, exactly. Jensen, it's not waking up in the cave and getting blown up by his own missile that wakes him up. It's Jensen. It's Jensen saying, "What are you going to do about it?" Because Stark's given up. He's like, "There's nothing I can do. They're just going to kill me. They're just going to use my weapons. I don't know what I'm going to do." And Jensen says, "Is this the great last act, or is this the last act of the great Tony Stark?"
Mm-hmm. It's a great line.
Oh, it is. It's fantastic. It's really well acted. I think it's an excellent character to have written in there, and he plays such an interesting line of, you think he's his captor, and then all of a sudden it's very clear that he's like this sort of co-prisoner sort of situation, translator, helper, schemer. Like there's a lot of nuanced dynamic in their relationship given in not much time, and they nail it, I think.
Yeah.
I just wish that they would give Jensen a bit more weight in the story moving forward in terms of Tony's reflection on what happened. It's always like, "Oh, I had my eyes open." And like, that's it. That's all he says.
So,
Yes.
in the original script, he flashes back to Jensen once or twice throughout the story. After he's made it back to America, so Jensen's character is actually a lot larger in the original story. They take longer to get to the same place they do in the film. So I'm not saying it's inherently better in the script because there's more of him. I think it's pretty close. But a lot of the stuff around Jensen's family and then the discovering that his family is actually already dead and he's there just to basically get Stark to actually do something about it. And then his own retaliation against the Ten Rings members, that takes it it's not twice as long, but it feels like there's twice as many scenes. There might actually be like maybe 50% more scenes of Tony and Jensen doing stuff in the off period.
Yeah.
They really rapidly get through the building of the Ark and then the building of the Mark One. They in the original script, there's a handful of nights and days, and it feels like they're actually there for quite a lot longer than what they are in the film. But then again, they also do cut back to Jensen. He thinks about Jensen's dying moments more than once. It's a little bit over the top at sometimes because it's like we don't always need a flashback to don't waste your life, Stark. We don't always need that. But it does show that it's also weighing on his mind. I think that there could have been a middle ground to do both between this and between what we got that I think is closer to what you want. Because I do agree that I think we could have had more of Jensen, and I don't think it would have been too slow. I think that there's a little bit more you could have without stepping over the line of this really needs to start picking up faster. That being said, totally. I understand why they wanted to get back to Malibu as quick as they could because they needed to tell the rest of the story.
It still takes them like 40 minutes to get through that first act, It's the full first third of the movie.
Totally. Yeah, it's a lot. But they need to get back.
Well, plus the flashback.
Yeah. Cool. Any other final thoughts about Iron Man?
No, I think that's it. No, they're not all going to be like this going forward because there's no other movies like this really in the MCU.
Not really.
So yeah, this is going to be an interesting moment in time, being the first one that we've done of this, and then the playbook's kind of write itself going from here, but not including here. Like it's all going to be different from here on, to a certain extent.
What I didn't expect so early is to get a lot of the groundwork for the things that I wanted to talk about in the story of the studio. A lot of the stuff
around previous stuff and how they talk about people writing for it. Yeah.
All that stuff, right? Like I actually thought that this film was done prior to that. And so
it's interesting because they talk a lot about how this movie defined the tone and how Favreau sort of the way he made the movie sort of defined how the MCU does their production. I guess the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
From what we can see here, that it on a more foundational level than we had realized then.
Yeah, like that this film is the blueprint, not just for the films they wanted to make, but the way they wanted to make films. Yeah. It's very, very interesting.
Yep. Who could blame him? Like it's a good movie.
It's great.
Really strong movie. I mean, I've always looked back on it fondly, but watching it this last week, I was like, this movie's like actually great. It's maybe excellent.
It was also the first, maybe the only, at least the first film to be entered into the National Archives of America from Marvel Studios, which Feige was very proud of in the interview between him and Favreau for the 15th anniversary, and which Feige says in classic nerd fashion, I don't actually really know what the criteria is, but I think it's really cool to be on a list like that. And that's sweet. And that's
honestly
funny.
Relatable.
Yeah. Like I get it. But it's funny as the head of the studio to be like, I don't really know what that means, but all my favorite films are on that list.
Especially if you're going to bring it up.
Yeah. And he goes like, all I know is that all my favorite films are on that list. And so I'm glad to have one on there or something. Yeah. So sources, archive.org for being a real one. Obviously not an actual source, but like a means of getting many of these.
A resource.
Yes. Reign of Marvel Studios by Joanna Robinson, Dave Gonzalez, Gavin Edwards. The Story of Marvel Studios by Tara Bennett. The Art of Marvel Studios, Iron Man, written by John Rhett Thomas. Superhero Hype, comicbook.com, Animation Magazine, Empire, Ain't It Cool News, Marvel.com, Animation World Network, Addicted to TV, CBR, HD Film Tools, Night Slade 2007 on YouTube, Sway's Universe, Craft Truck, Conan O'Brien, the AV Club, Movie List, Marvel Entertainment, Wired, Foundation Interviews, Fanfare.pub, CN8, Cleveland.com, MTV, Andy Cohen's Watch What Happens Next on E, Vulture, Collider, TheDirect.com, Independent.co.uk, the Iron Man scripts, Iron Man script by Mark Fergus, Hawk Otsby, Mark Holloway, and Art Markham, Iron Man script by Alfred Goff, Mark and Miles Miller with revisions by David Hayter, and The Iron Man screenplay by Jeff Vintar, story by Jeff Vintar and Stan Lee, Bloomberg, CNN, Movie Web, Iron Man Blu-ray special features, American Cinematic program at the Aero Theater featuring Jon Favreau and Robert Downey Jr. and Deadline.
That is an exhaustive list. That is very impressive. Thanks again to you, Jeremy, for all of your hard work on this. This is quite the undertaking.
I am so excited to watch The Incredible Hulk.
Honestly, me too. I'm so excited to do all of these. I'm so ready for it.
I'm also so excited because The Incredible Hulk has so much less stuff for me to sift through. Like, there's no 15th anniversary retrospective between Kevin Feige and the director of the Hulk, whose name escapes my mind. Like, they don't have that. Like, there's a lot of story in that one specifically, but like there is so much less to get through. At some point I'm going to be looking for things and I'm going to be like, I think this is probably about it.
Yeah. It's just like no one spoke about it then and no one's spoken about it since.
It's going to be very different to this, which is like there is so much stuff that I could not include, especially in the Art of Marvel Studios book. Like there's a lot of great stuff in there. That book's really good. And again, obviously the Reign of Marvel Studios and the Story of Marvel Studios are both really phenomenal books.
Mm-hmm.
But that does bring us to the end of the first official episode of the Box of Scraps. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this show, make sure you send it to your friends. If you have friends that are into Marvel a bit, if they're into movies, if they're into stuff that is sort of around Marvel, or maybe they've got a similar perspective that Kerry and I have, where they're sort of like, yeah, like they're good, but they used to be better, and what's going on and why, and sort of, you know, trying to understand or sort of make it a little bit, or even if you're looking at Doomsday and you're going, what the hell is going on over there?
They're bringing Robert Downey Jr. back as a different character who apparently was the character who's apparently meant to have been an Iron Man villain once upon a time.
I forgot to mention. There was one thing that I really forgot to mention. This was the thing that I was trying to figure out earlier that I'd forgotten. So, in the 15th anniversary conversation between Favreau and Feige, they mentioned that they had met up with Robert Downey Jr. previously before Marvel Studios for a potential role. Downey was originally in conversation to be Doctor Doom in the Fox Fantastic Four films. He met with them. Not with Favreau, but with Feige.
Yeah.
At Fox.
Wow.
It is
interesting.
Wild how this has turned out.
Yeah.
For him to be Doom, for people to say Doom is the perfect Iron Man villain, which I don't disagree. For him to almost
play both, Doom, though.
Yeah. How cosmically funny.
Yeah, I'm so chronically skeptical about that as a play. It's very bold, and look, fucking go for it. Like, I'm willing to let you convince me. If it works, then great. I just, with the last 5 years of output from them, I'm just not convinced it's going to happen. I just don't know that they can pull it off.
I'm also not convinced. If you are after at all, Kerry, a little insight into why Robert Downey Jr. might have come back.
Is it a Jim Carrey thing of I've spent all my money?
No, it is an article from Variety, which I pulled from 2024. So after he was pulled across. The headline is Behind Robert Downey Jr. and the Russo brothers Mega Avengers Paydays. So this article
yeah.
from Variety says, sources say that Marvel is plunking down $80 million for Anthony and Joe Russo to direct Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars, and significantly more for Downey to tackle uber-villain Doctor Doom. The Russo's deal doesn't include back-end compensation, but it does contain performance escalators that kick in at the $750 million and $1 billion thresholds. According to
that is a high bar. Fuck.
According to knowledgeable sources, Downey is by far the highest paid member of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and is pulled down between $500 and $600 million over the course of the 4 Avengers movies, 3 Iron Man outings, and cameos in The Incredible Hulk, Civil War, and Homecoming.
I think cameo in Civil War is a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I think it's doing heavy lifting there. But if he's been paid $600 million over those years, and then he walked away, and then they paid him significantly more than $80 million for this, we might be sitting at the $200, $300 million mark potentially.
Yeah.
The budgets of these films are big. They're not that big. It's pretty bonkers.
Yeah, it is. You kind of look at it as like, they want another Endgame moment. They want another $3 billion box office hit.
Yeah.
So, 200, 300 million for Robert Downey. If they can get the box office to hit 1.5 billion, 2 billion, 2.5 billion, then, that's an investment. Yeah. It's, it's funny as well, especially because we spoke about how Downey was a risk to hire in this role. And now sort of on the flip side, it's like, it's not because he's a liability, but now because he's been so successful and he's so well recognized, is it that he is now a risk for this new role? It's so weird. It's like poetry, Jeremy. It rhymes.
It rhymes. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to us. I don't have any time frame about when the next episode's coming up. I'm working on it. By the time you hear this, I've seen the Hulk at least once, and maybe twice, depending on if there's director's commentary already loaded onto my Blu-ray. If not, then I'll have to go digging for it, but that's fine.
That's the other part of this. Like, you're not going to have to go find some bootlegged director's commentary from here on.
And there's a lot of behind the scenes because I collected all the Blu-rays from ages ago. I've got all of them up to the second Spider-Man movie they made for the MCU. So I got resources. I got them in my shelf. Like, I'm there.
Yeah. You're ready to go, locked and loaded.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. Again, share it around, review it if you liked it. If you want to get in contact, if you want to leave, some comments and feedback, whatever, hit us up on social. You can find our social media accounts on minimap.com.au. I'm mostly jeremy.minimap.com.au on Blue Sky. Harry, you are?
I'm kjpalmer.bsky.social on Blue Sky.
I'm also Obi-Wan Jez in a bunch of places. There's an email on the website. Can't figure it out, let us know and we'll let you know the right way to reach out to us. Aside from that, see you next time.